What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Final Fantasy Entertainment Podcast Network, Final Fan TV. This is a spoiler cast for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and I am joined with two amazing guests to talk about this game because there's a lot to talk about, and I need to get it out. I need to vent, and I really want to hear what they think, and I want to hear what you think. So as I can see right now over on the left side, the chat is there. You guys fire off with your comments, keep into the conversation, and we'll try to bring you in as much as we can. But we're going to kick this thing just right off with the ending talk, because I feel like that's where we are, right? That's where everybody, if you're tuning in, you want to talk about this ending, and I think that's the best way to start it off. So to do so, I'd like to throw this over to my first guest over here, Lully Joe. Lully, what I want to do is maybe get like a vibe check. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Where do you stand on the ending and the overall story? So like kind of just a synopsis of your feelings, because we're gonna get into it, into the details in just a moment. But go ahead.
So it's so hard for me to have like a clear opinion on the ending, because I decided, even when they announced the remake trilogy, I was like, I'm here for the ride. They're gonna do whatever they're gonna do, and I know I'm gonna feel a kind of way about it. So I have tempered expectations to be like, anything goes, anything can happen. So after the ending of remake, getting to the ending of Rebirth, I couldn't even be upset or have like any negative feelings. So I was like, I kind of saw this coming. Like, I fully expected this. So, and I also just enjoyed it just because, like, Cloud and Aerith are both my favorite characters. So to get to spend that much time with them together, and that was really interesting. And I also felt super vindicated because I had been saying forever, I was like, this game is not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same as the original. And people gaslit me about it all the time. So to have, like, more than even 2 timelines, to have 5 for certain shown to us, I'm like, vindication. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's like, I wouldn't say that I think this is narratively like genius, but I don't hate it either. Like, okay. I'm kind of like, you know what? I'm having a good time. I don't care.
That's fair. I like that. Yeah, it's just, okay. How about you, Subtext? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite the experience. I mean, I remember after, going into the dream date sort of sequence with Aerith, I was like, wow, this is different. It's interesting. I don't know how much I like that it's so focused on just their particular relationship, but then when you look through the whole scope of like their time together and where that ends up in terms of having children, and the things that she says at the end of that sequence in terms of like reassuring him, you realize that it's playing into this larger kind of game for Cloud's sort of mind state, and there's something really interesting to that. And then it got into the multiple worlds and back stuff, and I was starting to feel nervous because it's inherently just very messy, right? Even though it was kind of established, I wondered if there would be some kind of different explanation or some other way to sort of explore the idea. And there were certain things in the ending that I think would be hype for a lot of fans, but for me were a little, do I want this? Like, is this, like, I get that people really want this. I get that people really want to have this moment of like Zack and Cloud side by side fighting Sephiroth, but is this just fan service or is this deeper than that? So I had some fears, and then I reached the very end, and I thought this is really interesting in terms of the way that they're portraying Cloud and his mind state. So it was this crazy up and down journey, all the way until the credits, and then when the credits hit, I felt sort of this emptiness almost, like I didn't really have a good, like a positive or a negative feeling. It was just this in-between space, and I didn't really know what to make of it. I was slightly disappointed, if I'm being 1,000% honest, but also open to maybe there's something different here, or if I look back on it more. And in the week since I've beaten it, I do think there is more to it, and I've unpacked a lot more sort of layers to it. And I'm, for what it's doing for the overall 3-game sort of arc, I think it's potentially interesting in terms of what it's setting up. I think a challenge that they're facing, and that I felt a lot with this ending, is that they're almost they're almost too focused on the broader end game of everything, which would be great if we had the 3rd game immediately available.
Right.
But so they structure the ending so that it's setting up what's next, which kind of the first part, which the first game did as well, but like it's not the most satisfying ending for like this game in some ways. Because it's so focused on the bigger sort of meta game and the conversation. So it's not really providing any, they haven't committed to anything yet, right? Like, is she dead? Is she alive? It seems like obviously she's dead within the world that has been set up, but then we also see him sort of interrupt the attack, and then seemingly maybe another world is created. So they haven't committed to anything within this moment. So it's really hard to sort of be upset or angry, or you don't know what to feel because like you're not sure what you're seeing yet. So it's really hard to sort of like anchor yourself in this ending. I think that sense of like being unsettled is fascinating, and it seems like they're just serving this master of like, we have another game to get to, we have 4 years or 3 years maybe, hopefully a little less, of like getting to the next part. So how do we get people continue to talking and thinking and engage with the story? So it's serving that more than it's serving Final Fantasy VII Rebirth in the year 2024. And I think that's kind of just a creative challenge that they've set themselves up with, where they're trying to do everything at once, tell a 3-game 10-year story, and then also a game in this moment in time over 40 to 100 hours, however long you take with side content. It's just the most challenging creative problem to crack, and I think there are going to be fault lines in it, and some things are going to give here and there. So yeah, that's where I'll pause for now.
Okay,
But
yeah, I mean,
there's even more.
this is going to be a good one. Yeah, we're going to be talking for a while on this one. I think what you guys said is where I'm at as well. So this is interesting because I didn't know going into this, I didn't know where you all were going to be with this. I didn't know if we were going to have, different viewpoints, a very positive one. I wanted to balance out my negative. But it seems like we're kind of all on the same page. And honestly, I got to be honest with you. I would have been surprised if, because I know you guys are big fans of the original Final Fantasy VII, and I would have been really surprised, and that's why I'm keeping an eye on chat as well. And I think I saw Major Trenton with an 11 out of 10, and I know Major Trenton is a very big Final Fantasy VII fan. So kind of curious of how that ending hit really well for him. But yeah, I mean, it's like you said, it didn't serve the now, and I feel like it was almost a disservice to the characters that we've been spending so much time with for the past 100+ hours between remake and rebirth. I mean, you got to think with being able to spend as much time as we did with Aerith, and I think they really wrote Aerith as such a fantastic character this time around, and we all knew it was a tragedy in our minds. Like, we knew this was a tragedy play, we knew what was going to happen to her, and it's just like, oh man, we're falling in love with this character, she's so great, and they're really driving it home. Rebirth, in my opinion, personally, I feel like the theme of Rebirth was supposed to be, and they put a word on it already with I think it was Nojima that put a word on it, connectedness or something. So that connectedness, that found family, where synergy attacks and all this other stuff is to build that bond, that relationship between the characters. And it felt like over the course, for me personally, that it felt like this was building up to that moment, and this is building up to the heartbreak. This is going to break your heart, because you're going to lose this character that is, that you can't not like Aerith. Like, she is so great in this game, the way that they wrote her. in both games. And it felt to me as a disservice when it comes to that moment, because what happened was it seemed as if they were like, we're going to throw emotional impact out the window and trade that in for this plate of theory fodder, is what I've been calling it. It's theory fodder. Like, hey, here's something to keep you satiated for the next 4 years while we work on part 3. Here you go. Look at all these scenes frame by frame, and then try to decipher what the heck is going on. Where in some cases, I feel like that can be good. Like, that can be like Lost. I love that series. I love watching Lost and just dissecting everything I could have back in the day to try and predict. And it's almost similar in a way to like those Flash sideways, the Flash, all of that stuff. If you're a fan of Lost, you know what I'm talking about. And I love doing that stuff. I basically built Final Fan TV to do that stuff. So you guys, the same thing. We want to talk about it. But unfortunately, this moment did not call for that. Like, this moment was not supposed to be, like theory talk. It wasn't supposed to be a convoluted mess. I don't want to say that. Like, I'm not trying to be negative, but it felt messy. It felt kind of in its execution. And I had been thinking about it in my mind too, of like, I feel like they could have done what they did, like the objective that they're trying to convey, like everything they were trying to convey, I feel like could have been done in a better way, but still allow us time to actually feel something. And I didn't feel like, I didn't even shed a tear, which I feel like...
Yeah, me either.
Exactly. So I think that, for me, when it boils down to it, the fact that I didn't shed a tear for one of the most iconic deaths in gaming, not just Final Fantasy, not Final Fantasy 7, in gaming, I didn't shed a tear, and it did not recapture that feeling I had back in, when I played it as a kid, and every, time I've played the game, get to that moment, you're just like, oh man, the original game did that with such perfect execution of like allowing time, like even Sephiroth stabbing Aerith, then allowing the Jenova battle to take place with Aerith's music playing, and it was very somber. It was almost eerie. It was almost like, oh man, I don't want to fight this battle right now. But Rebirth kind of did that with Aerith's theme playing while Jenova's battle, and then all of a sudden that like it kicks in, and you're just like, and you got one more, no, that's not one more shot. It was like, take that, huh? And they're like, they're doing the vocal call outs in their battle chatter, and I'm like, that's why. I think at one point, I'm diving in too far. I'm sorry. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. But that's kind of where I'm at overall with it, where I just feel like the rest of this game, like the entire game, and we're going to talk about that. So if you guys, I don't want to, for anybody watching this right now, I don't want to sour your experience, right? So like if you're really high on it and you don't want to hear me talk about that in a negative way, I totally understand. You can go ahead and drop out. Or if you want to, which I would really appreciate, is just comment, respectfully say that like, oh man, this is the reason why I think it's great. Because I really want to
I'll probably throw out some ideas too on like why it works, like the ways in which it works.
Cool, that's fantastic. That's what I want.
But it is like a.
It does make you feel torn.
Yeah, I'm just trying to. I was just like communicating my in the moment Friday night 3 a.m. when I beat it sort of feeling, because I also don't want to deny that just because I've had a week to sort of dwell on it and think about, oh, actually it's really smart that X, Y, and Z is what they're setting up or they're building to, or if you look at this and that, there's something really interesting there. Like that is sort of removed from the immediate moment of what I felt, and so I didn't want to like. I just wanted to give my initial sort of like feeling toward it, because I do think it's a very complex. I don't think there's any way anybody feels just one way about this ending. Yeah. And if they do, I think that's interesting.
Especially once it simmers, you kind of start thinking about it, and I think that's why people have that almost empty feeling, because you're just like, I don't necessarily hate this, but I don't love it either. Like,
Yeah.
I don't really know how I feel.
God, it's so cool. It's actually what I said into one of these messages. I messaged a couple people. One of the Cloud Picard, Dr. Robert Mold, everybody, and then Night Sky Prince. I was like, hey man, I got. What are your thoughts? I need to know. I need to know. I was just reaching out to everybody I knew that beat the game. But I said the same thing where it's like, this isn't 2020 for me. This isn't 2020 right after remake. And, for those who follow the channel and know me, it took a long time for me to kind of recover and bounce back from remake where I was not happy. But it took me a long time to finally get back and I'm, become, the warrior of hype again, because I was genuinely very hyped for Rebirth, and Rebirth on all accounts, except for this ending, delivered for me. But it wasn't like that where I was like so mad or so like disappointed or whatever. I just was like, okay, it was just kind of like, all right, I'm gonna have to rewatch that a couple times. I'm gonna, I wasn't mad. I am a little. I think I'm on the negative side of disappointed or maybe content. Like I'm just content with it. Where, for me, like as I was saying in my overall thoughts, when it came down to it and I realized I wasn't shedding a tear, I wasn't emotionally broken on this moment, I was like, that feels like a misfire. That's a misstep. That feels like the writing kind of like fell off. Something happened. And I was telling you guys before we went live where it really felt like two different writers involved, two different minds were involved in this, where the first 12 chapters of the game, maybe even I'd throw in the Temple of the Ancients as well, because that was really well done. Maybe the chapter 14 was from somebody else's mind that was just like, hey, this is how the game's going to end so we can get ready for part 3. Go ahead and do whatever you want with the first 90% of the game, but this is happening in the final act. And he's like, oh, but we've already written it doesn't make any sense. And then there's like, no, you're gonna do it. But it's just like, oh, okay, cool, I guess. But for me, like 90% of the story, it was just fantastic. It was perfectly executed. There were so many additional things that were added, and fleshed out, and everything was going so smoothly. And then I just didn't like, because that rainbow effect starts coming in, and I was already like keen to it. My eyes were already focused on it. Whenever it was a new timeline, that rainbow mist would pop up. And then Zack going down the tunnel, another rainbow mist popping out. And then when Cloud did the whole like, no, and like stopped it, rainbow mist popped out, and I went, and I was like, that's a different timeline where Aerith is saved. And I was just like, and that was it. It just completely detached me. And of course you have the whispers circling around, and I'm like, whispers always disconnect me from anything anyway. But everything was just not flowing the way it should have. And honestly, I truly do believe if Sephiroth would have came down and just freaking did it, that would have subverted my expectations, right? Because like that's what you were talking about, Lolly, where it's like we were already mentally prepared for like this kind of stuff. But like if they would have just did it, I would have been like, oh shit, oh, I would, and then like and just like having Cloud like holding her and like crying and like actually expressing these emotions. One thing I will point out is that Tifa should have been the main focus. If they were going to go the route of Cloud still being broken, and just like completely just out of it, and even seeing her, whatever they wanted to go that route, I would have loved for them to take the camera for just a few minutes or just moments to just focus in on Tifa. Because I feel, and I'm all over the place with this one, so stay with me, but I feel like Tifa has become the most important character in the game for me. Like, her story now represents everything that Final Fantasy is to me, where Final Fantasy VII is to me, where it's all about that loss and like overcoming that loss. And Tifa has now lost her home, her father. She's lost her best friend Jessie at one point. Like she lost her. She's
reliving that
trauma over and over and over. And now Cloud on the gondola, and we'll talk about that in a minute, where that is kind of messing with her head now. Like, oh my god, this is what's going on with Cloud? Cloud.
But just to build on, but Cloud at the end too, she's almost like lost him as well, because like
Exactly.
mentally, like physically he's there, but mentally
she might as well like not even like she might as well say that she's lost Cloud at this point. She's now her best friend, Aerith. Like the bond that they highlighted so much in this game, in the remake, the bond between Aerith and Tifa. Screw Cloud if you don't want to focus on that for now. Give me Tifa. Like, just
they need to go in on Tifa in part 3, especially because like you said, she's the one who has the most that she's lost so far, and like Cloud is so far gone, he's not grieving with her, and he's like arguably the only other person who would feel the loss of Aerith at the same level that Tifa would, because she met Aerith through Cloud. So, and like she's sitting here grieving, and Cloud just doesn't seem to give a shit. She doesn't have anyone to lean on, because like Aerith was her rock.
Yep.
And like, it's like she's being left behind. Like the look on her face of like she's so scared and alone, and like she almost seems afraid to even say anything to Cloud too. Like it's like she's looking at him like fuck you. Like I'm so upset and you're not reacting, and like how dare you? And it's like it's almost like she's afraid to say anything at the same time though. Because it's like everything that happened at Temple of the Ancients, like, you know that she's like, if I say the like, now she has a reason to not tell him off, because now she's like, okay, I'm actually scared of you now.
Yeah,
that's a good. Yeah, that's a good.
And
word.
that is what
she's scared of him.
That is what the trilogy and Rebirth has done so well. Is they've done such a good job at building a little more reason for everything that was in the original. It's why it's like so hard to come down too harshly on it, because you know, even if things don't work, it's like other things work so goddamn well that you're just like, oh my god. So for example, exactly what you're talking about, Lily, it's like the Tifa not speaking up, which people have argued about over the years, and people say, you know what, well, it makes sense, you know, she didn't want to upset him. It's like seeing how he's portrayed right now at the end of Rebirth, it is hard to imagine saying something to him, because he is not well. Like, he doesn't look well, even if some things might not be crazy. Like him seeing potentially, you know, Aerith's spirit and maybe the rift in the sky and other timelines. He may not be crazy when it comes to that.
He sure looks like it.
But he looks like it, right? Yeah, he looks crazy as hell. So of course you'd be like nervous of that. Actually,
and he's attacked her.
Yeah, and he
straight up attacked her.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I think they did well in terms of like that moment. I still haven't went back and looked at all the choreography of what happened in that Gongaga scene, because I've had people bring up like why aren't people more mad with Cloud? I'm pretty sure there was like some kind of piece of the environment that fell and portioned off like Cloud and Tifa, so you couldn't really see what was happening there. So they know Tifa fell in, but do they know that he attacked her and everything? I'm not entirely sure. So I remember in the original, because I just replayed it also earlier this year, like, it always struck me weird that after attacking Aerith at the Temple of the Ancients, suddenly like, come on, Cloud! And then it's like,
get it together.
And then they get to the ancient city in the altar, and Cloud is like, I got this. It's like, do you? You're like, why does anybody believe this guy should be the one to go up to Aerith right now?
Barrett is the only one where I was like, this is kind of weird. Why is, like, Barrett's gotta be, he's gotta know now. Like, something's going on. But I know they kind of try to pass it off a little bit as, like, the degradation. They tried to pass it off as that, like, oh, Cloud's just sick with that. But they did
a better job. What I was saying was in the Gongaga thing, where it's like maybe not everybody saw it. Tifa is obviously going to cover for him. It was a while back before the temple thing. There's more reason for it that it makes sense of why people aren't confronting him as much. That said, in the Temple of the Ancients, when he's being an absolute dickwad.
Yeah, it took them way too long to be like, you asshole.
Yeah.
It took them a little long. You were actively annoyed at the party for not saying anything. And you're like, what the heck? Like, the guy is acting really weird. You know, it's not like a little weird.
He was so mean to Aerith when she was hyping them up, and that for me was the last straw. I was like, would someone punch him, please?
Yeah.
So that was actually something, where is it? I think it was Faith Alone in the chat said that Aerith's trial was the saddest part. So like, I think, and this is follow up with what you just said, because the trials happen, and I think that was probably one of my favorite parts of the entire game. Like, just because I was like, this is it. They're finally allowing these characters and the player to just feel something. And that was one of my criticisms for the game, where it felt very MCU, very like, hey, there's a punchline, there's action right around the corner, so don't feel sad for too long because we got you. We're gonna keep. They finally allowed them to just have this moment, and it was so perfect. I think Barrett's the one that got me. Like Barrett's trial, like that made me choke up. So that's where my emotion, like the emotion that I was hoping for this game, that emotional weight, happened at that moment, and it was probably the best thing. And Aerith's speech afterwards was so good. You know, like that was such a great speech, and it was like, there it is. There's the Final Fantasy VII that I've been, you know, like that's it right there. And then Cloud just going, you know, just like shutting her down right after that. I was like, oh shit, okay, here we go.
And they just let it go.
Yeah, I mean, they just let it go. But I feel like maybe, I don't know, maybe they were a little skeptical. Maybe they were just like, well, that would have been great just to see their face and go, like just like that meme, like. You know, but
you finished now?
Yeah. You just,
yeah.
Like,
Oh my god.
Really? But yeah, I freaking love that moment. I love that Cloud, like every time that he was going through something like that, it was so eerie and so tense. And I'm like, oh, they're doing this great right now. And that's where all my pros come in. Like I just feel like they did all of that stuff so very well.
While we're talking about that specific moment too, I was thinking about this earlier because I was watching it earlier, and I have more things to say about that temple speech, but I think it'll send us in a different direction. So within where we are, I remember being annoyed with Cloud saying like, you finished now and I was actually messaging, like texting Lily like live, like this fucking Barrett better kick his ass. But or they shouldn't. Maybe he shouldn't have said that, and he should have just like walked away, just been quiet and like walked away, because like it's a little bit of a. I thought they were pushing the Cepha Cloud thing a little hard.
Maybe. I
I
loved it when he hugged him. Like I was like, oh man, he get like just kind of hugged him.
The scene after that was amazing. It was just they were pushing it so hard and nobody was acknowledging it, and it was driving me crazy. But you know, in rewatching it earlier today, I was thinking about there's something to, and I noticed it in the moment, but I didn't. I was thinking about it again today when I was watching it. Aerith at the end of that whole speech, she's like, so you know, we can stop Sephiroth, and we can even stop him. And the shot, the way it's like shot, is interesting because it's like close in on the bottom of her face, and she's pointed toward Cloud. So I was wondering if she was actually seeing it within him and like commenting on it. So that because she even when he says that, then she reacts, oh right, she's very soft in response to how mean he is. But I think it's because she's almost acknowledging that what's happening within him, and is like. Is handling it with care.
Because she already knows what's about to happen. She knows that he's about to like go crazy and do all this stuff. If we're under the assumption this is Advent Children Aerith the whole time, and I think she is.
I am curious about the perspective, and your guys' perspective. I'm going to throw it out there in terms of like, what does Aerith know throughout this game? Because in chapter 1, I think it is, in the column in, Tifa asked a question about Cloud's past. And she's like, I think you would know. And Aerith says, like, I did at some point. I probably did at some point, but the Whisperers kind of took that away from me. But then later on, Red 13 has a moment where he says in his date scene of like, you know, we could see the future, but not anymore, right? Like me and Aerith could see the future, but not anymore. And I believe that he probably lost his sight. But I'm still not sure how much Aerith forgot, because I don't know how much she's pretending about it, because she knows about the fake materia at the temple. She knows, obviously, like, meta live stream Aerith, whatever the Aerith we see in the, who gives him the full holy materia in the date scene. Obviously, that Aerith is aware of everything. But I'm just like, I want to replay this game again and see if there are more hints of the Aerith that we know in the Beagleverse, knowing things and showing signs of knowing things, because I feel like there were a few, but I don't know all of them. It was more hidden than in Remake, where she's like constantly sort of seemingly knowing everything.
Yeah. There's so much more to like unpack with that too, where like, yeah, she was able to transfer that to like Red 13, and how much does Red 13 know? But like, how did Marlene, like, that was one of my questions, was just like, how did Marlene know? And I kind of put it to where these worlds merged already, so where it's, I'm under the assumption that remake, when you get to like Zack and Biggs, so this is a question for you guys, so if you know the answers or whatever, but like let me know so I can clear it up. But like where Zack and Biggs, we get to that timeline when the new stamp bag comes in or something like that. I'm trying to figure it out because like it seems as though the remake, the events of remake happened where Cloud did go through. He was a merc. He was, all of these things did happen. And then they even say on the news broadcast that they're looking for, somebody with a Buster Sword. So that person's missing. So they were with, like, Cloud was with the crew when they failed to escape, and then you see him on the stretchers and everything. So I'm assuming that Marlene has these memories, or like has the know-how or the know of Sephiroth is going, a big scary man's going to come in and kill her, because Aerith showed her. But first of all, why would you show a little kid that? And then like why would you I don't like, why would you show this little kid that, hey, I'm gonna die, but like, okay, and then the kid goes on. But like when the world's like, when that whole big event happens, I'm trying to figure out, Zack walks into that timeline, Biggs wakes up in that timeline, but the timeline seems to have just split or something, like, because Cloud was in that remake. Come on, guys, help me out here.
Okay. So first thing I want to mention is, like, I don't think Aerith purposefully showed Marlene that. Okay. I think if people touch her, because remember when Cloud met Aerith and she grabbed him, he suddenly could see the whispers. And I don't think she did that on purpose either. I think it's just sometimes when people touch her or get too close to her, some of her abilities spills out.
Okay.
So I think when she grabbed Marlene, that's what happened, and she realized Marlene noticed it, and so she was like, "Don't say anything. Like, you're not supposed to know that."
Yeah. Or like, it calmed her down too.
Yeah, that was the strange part of it for me.
It calmed her down, right?
It just like, why would that calm her down?
Maybe I feel like I start flooding in later.
Yeah, I had always assumed that it was her seeing like her and Barrett far in the future, A-OK, and like that would calm her down.
Okay.
So the fact that what she saw was a scary man killing the stranger she just met, like, considering that calmed her down, is a little feels a little retconny, but probably isn't. But it's just weird. It's probably like weird plot hole, messy timeline.
I never saw it as her calming down. I saw it as her being like, that was big and scary, and then Aerith is like, it's fine, everything's fine. Let's hold my hand. What's your favorite flower? Because like kids, you really, if they see an adult is like, telling them everything's okay, and if they're not panicking, the kid will usually kind of like mirror that a little bit. And she also is like, the whole thing is on fire. It's overstimulating. So I think if I was in that situation as a little kid and an adult came in and was like, everything's fine, I've got you, I would be like, okay, please, because I don't want to be scared.
Yeah, do want to highlight Joshy Poo right now with the super chat. Thank you so much for that, man. Really, really appreciate it. Says, in my opinion, the ending was about loss. Game 3's is about grief. We can't grieve yet because Cloud is in denial. When he accepts his 2 traumas, we'll get that water burial closure. Dev said that loss is sudden and empty. We feel empty by design. That's a very interesting point. So it's something that I've kind of thought of about, like, well, okay, so part 3, when we kind of repair Cloud's like mind and psyche and bring him back together, maybe we do see like, hey, here's what happened at the Forgotten Capital, and let's repair that. Let's get, and then that's the moment we really take some time to, like, this is going to be Cloud's trial, right? Like, this is, like the trial moments we had in Rebirth, where when we finally go into the live stream and we're putting Cloud back together, maybe we stop by the Forgotten Capital instead of the other original locations in that game. So that's a really good point, Josh. I'm glad you wrote that in, because it could be that part 3 kind of redeems that whole, hey, here we go. This is what you've been looking for.
That's a little bit of what I was saying at the very, very beginning of when we were talking about the ending of, like, it seems like they're so focused on that 3-game arc versus what we're experiencing currently that it's just very difficult to sort of have any kind of real true opinion on this ending that is so definitive, because, like, it could pay off really well, right? Like, game 3 could have the live stream sequence, or however they bring it to life, where Cloud is going on this journey in the Worldwood Maze and then actually finding the truth, and, like, whatever they did with that maybe new timeline where Aerith lives, like how they reconcile that. It could. I've talked for, like, ever since the ending of, like, how I think it'd be interesting. They've set up a lot of, like, Jenova shape-shifting in this more than in the original, in my opinion. That with, like, the weird Glennaroth thing, and which, you know, I don't like him as a character, but I understand sort of what they're doing with him. And even with I even wonder if the Gi Natak that we talked to, I wonder if he is specifically actually Gi Natak, or if that's another Jenova sort of mimicry thing. Just because of how Bugenhagen reacts. Don't have to go too deep onto it, but, like, basically after the Gi Natak tells him all this stuff about the temple and whatnot, Bugenhagen's like, that sounds like it's said by someone who doesn't really understand their culture. So, like, I don't even know, like, how truthful that was, or if that was another mimic. And I wonder if there's going to be a moment where we see Aerith, but it's not actually Aerith, it's actually Jenova. And it's playing with Cloud's sort of inability to tell what's real and what's not. So I think they're playing with a lot of those things, and it could be really interesting. But yeah.
Quick observation on that one, because that is something I had thought of. When they're sitting by the water and they're, you know, like, they robbed us of the burial in the water. After they did that, when they're sitting by the water, Cloud goes, and, like, it's a mental glitch. It's the green mental glitch. It's the Jenova glitch. And then he looks over and he sees Aerith, which was kind of like, wait a second, that's Jenova rewriting something. That's Jenova she can appear as those you love, those you fear. And, like, he could be looking over and seeing Aerith, but my whole thing would be, like, why? That's almost, it seems a little weird to have that as the final scene of this emotional farewell, I'll send you off type thing, if that's not actually Aerith. But he did do, like, a mental glitch and see Aerith sitting next to him.
I debated that a lot with Lily, and I think she can probably articulate it.
Yeah. Okay. So here's my whole thing. I think that when we get those little glitches, I don't think they're always indicative of Jenova Roth, because I think it's more intrusive thoughts, or, like, thoughts that are entering his mind very suddenly, because we know it doesn't happen with all memories, because when he calls on memories, we don't get the glitch. And sometimes he gets that glitch not for anything related to Jenova, but it's, like, almost like reality is coming up unexpectedly, and he's pushing it back down. Like, nope, I don't want to think about that. So to me, I think there's 3 things that happen when we get that glitch. I think one, it's trying to show us he's getting intrusive thoughts. Like, they're not thoughts that he necessarily wants. They're just happening to him, and it's cueing in the player to be like, this is happening to Cloud right now. He sees this right now. And it's sudden and weird, and he doesn't know how to feel about it. So it can either be related to his dissociative identity disorder, Jenova, or literally just, like, something is calling on him, like something weird is happening. And I think in that moment, I remember what I was going to say. The actual third thing is him going between timelines, remembering things from the other timeline, because Sephiroth told him when he took him through the timeline, like, telling him how the world works, he says, I give you my blessing.
Yeah.
And he takes him to the Forgotten Forest, or the Sleeping Forest. That's when Cloud has the holy materia, and Sephiroth gives him shit for it. He's like, you're not supposed to have that here. That's bad form. So he's saying, I brought you to another timeline, and you're doing it wrong. You're not supposed to have that here, because Aerith is supposed to have it there. So what's happening is Cloud can now see multiple timelines. I don't think he has the control that Aerith and Sephiroth have. I think it happens to him randomly sometimes. And that's why he doesn't know that the rest of the cast can't see the split in the sky.
Yeah.
He thinks they can all see it because he doesn't know what is one timeline and what's another timeline happening to him. He's aware enough to know that he's in the timeline where Aerith is dead to not bring up Aerith to everyone else because they can't see her. They think she's dead, but he's like, there's a timeline she's alive and I can talk to her.
Mm-hmm.
But again, there's only some things he knows and some things he doesn't know, and I think they're going to use that to make him look crazier and create a rift between him and the party, which is going to cause all kinds of problems leading up to the live stream sequence where they're going to have to not only put his identity back together, but help him figure out what happened when and where.
Yeah. That's
the thing I was going to build on that too, the other thing that Lily had mentioned when we were debating it was also when those glitches happen, they're sort of like temporary, and I think that's also key to it too, in terms of, because I went back and rewatched it, and the glitch happens when he's by the pool, and then you see a shot of her death, but it only happens in like for a bit, and then he comes back out of it and he sees Aerith. The first for a while, for a few days, I thought that was Jenova Aerith for sure. Like I thought they were already starting to play with it, like as Jenova like posing as Aerith, and then the Aerith that we see at the end was actually Aerith, but it's like the start of seeding the idea of like that he can't tell between the two of them. But I do think she's there at the pool to just reassure him, just like she's there at the end to reassure him. So like I still think they're going to play with that in part 3. Like I think there's going to be some point. I would be surprised if there is a point in part 3 where we don't get a Jenova Aerith. But yeah. Shoot, there was one more point, but I forgot. Anyway.
So kind of Josh Poo brings it up and says, do you all think that Cloud remembers that Aerith died? And this kind of goes to what Lolly was saying, where like an intrusive thought, or like a thought that would be, it's a thought that Jenova doesn't want him to think, I guess. So it kind of has me thinking, just like spur of the moment here without like really developing the theory or whatever, but where Cloud is sitting there watching the waters, that I'm assuming that he just buried or dropped her in the water. Like he just did that thing, but he doesn't remember. Like maybe he was sitting by the water and then he starts thinking about it, and then Jenova's like, nope, don't think about that. Which kind of has me thinking, well, does Jenova and Sephiroth not want Cloud to grieve at this moment? Like not think about this? And then when you were talking about like Cloud is seeing, or he's traveling between two different worlds, I had kind of thought that these worlds had merged, and Cloud is just walking between them. Like he's a rift walker. I don't know, but like he's kind of he's kind of walking, and then all of a sudden he can see both worlds at the same time because they have merged on him or something. This is kind of where I was at with it, to where even when he's laying there with Aerith he's laying there with Aerith is laying in his arms, he's seeing like it's just happening at the same time, like zip, blood, no blood, and then wake up, you're alive, and like
that is interesting, because guess who all wasn't there to see it happen? The rest of the party. So they can only experience the one version of the timeline, while he saw both things happen.
Oh shoot, you froze. Here we go again, chat. Here we go again. Thanks everybody for sticking around. That's when I know. I feel like the conversation is good enough, because we had everybody stick around for that. We didn't lose any viewers, which is like, okay, so people are kind of enjoying it. These conversations are kind of difficult to have when you start to like, I don't know how I feel about this. But yeah, so Lolly, you were in the middle of saying something, and then something got cut off. I'm so sorry. I don't really remember what that was.
All I remember is I was saying something about Cloud experiencing two worlds at the same time. But something I do want to bring up, because I don't know if enough people have noticed this, because if you remember in the original game, when Aerith dies, to give this sense of heightened emotion, the entire party will either their limit break like gets up higher faster, or they automatically all have a limit. In this version, they all get auto limit except for Cloud. He is the only one that does not have a limit break immediately. And if you pay attention
That's
to a
cool.
lot of the things they say during the battle, like when Cloud ends up by himself with Jenova, he says, I did this once, I can do it again. So we have to ask, is he talking about the first time he had to fight Jenova in Remake, or is he talking about the first time when he fought Jenova in OG after this scene?
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
That's
and another thing that I think is really interesting is when Aerith joins you for the final battle, she says, I saw what you did there back there for me, Cloud. Thank you.
Yeah.
So what is she talking about? And I can only assume she saw that he fought tooth and nail to get past not only Sephiroth's whispers, but her whispers to save her, and then successfully did in at least one timeline, whether it got merged or he got forced back into the other one. I think she saw it because I think all the Aeriths are kind of like a hive mind. I think she can interact with all of them because that's the only thing that makes sense to me.
That's also an explanation that's in the Ultimania around the multiple Sephiroths. Like in the Ultimania, they said that there's like, I think 4 different Sephiroths in Remake. And like one of them, the one that's at the edge of creation, is the one that we hadn't met yet or something like that at any other earlier point in the game, but that they were all connected by the same will, is what it said. And so maybe that's a similar thing with Aerith, especially because there has been such a direct thing of like Lifestream Black, Lifestream White. Now we have Black Whispers, White Whispers. Seemingly some of them are more on the side of Aerith and the party and the planet, and the others are more under the control of Sephiroth. So it seems that they're playing with that. And that is also, I want to jump in there and just say, like, because I think we started off the podcast because we were talking about the negatives, because I think all of us may have had a little bit more of it's just a hard ending to make sense of. And like I said, it's within the scope of just like this one game, it's a challenge to sort of feel incredibly fulfilling. But I think like it's a great ending for what it's trying to do, like what the trilogy is trying to build, which is not exactly the same as the original. And there were debates on that on like one of my Twitter threads of, I just don't think there's any way you could say this is exactly the same as the original game, even if like many of the plot points are very similar, because that's usually what people bring up is like, we still got this scene and this scene and this scene and this scene. It's like, yes, we got those scenes, but we also have Zack crossing sort of the rifts and fighting with you, and like dialogue like Lily just brought up of like Aerith seemingly aware of things that happen in different timelines. Like it's not just filling in the gaps or adding things to the original.
The whole backstory with
there
the
is
V.
more new stuff.
Love it.
It's completely new. It's cool. I love it. I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
But it's like
you can
they
even say
took that and completely blew open the world building.
Yeah.
But you can even say that that's just like adding to the original world. Like now we know, like now if you were to play the original, like now we know more about the Gi technically.
Yeah.
But like I think a lot of the other stuff that we've been talking about is not just filling in the gaps that weren't there or weren't pictured in the original. It is all new stuff. Like there is a new kind of story, even with similar kind of beats leading up to it. There are more, and to that point, because going back exactly what you were talking about, Lily, in terms of the limit break thing. So it seems like the center of Temple of the Ancients is I'm going to go back to that to the thing that I was thinking about earlier, where Aerith in her speech, she kind of refutes the idea that pain and anger are like and loss are kind of the emotional core of FF7. And I think that's why it's a little bit difficult to sort of process this ending, because a lot of us, even though she did die, we're not 100% sure if she's like always dead. That's the thing to like Joshy Poo's like super chat of like, the feeling empty thing is not feeling empty because I lost someone. I felt empty because I didn't know if I lost someone or not, so I didn't know how to feel. So like, but the things that Aerith says, and I wrote it down, she says, it's true that the pain and the anger we can carry make us stronger, but at what cost? What toll does that take? I believe true strength doesn't come from any of that. True strength comes from our ability to forgive, to forge ahead in the hope of making things right. It comes from ourselves. And Sephiroth wants to do the opposite, right? Like when he hugs him, he says he wants to fill his hollow heart with rage so he could burn this world down like Sephiroth did. And when the death happens, he talks about this confluence of worlds, of emotions, of anger, pain, and wanting to feed the planet. Like, it seems that Aerith is actively working to deny Sephiroth that by giving Cloud that reassurance. That's why his limit break isn't all the way up at the start of the fight. It's why he's like not really grieving. and that could have a negative consequence, right? Like they could backfire. But it seems like she did that for a reason, to stop that sort of like that rage and whatnot. And I think that's why they cut. I also think that's really interesting in terms of like when they cut to Cloud when he's like crying, and then like they cut to what I think is, I imagine, was the speech in the original where he's like talking a lot, but you don't hear what he says, but he's like angry and saying,
you know, like all describing how he feels type thing.
So I don't know. It's they're playing with this concept of like anger and rage and loss and grief and like what it can lead to, and Sephiroth sort of wanting to stir the pot and Aerith sort of working to subvert that. And I don't know what to make of that because we don't have a third game. But it seems like it seems like they're not just trying to make Cloud angry, like, and the players angry or sad like they were at the end of the disc one of the original. It seems like they're trying to speak to something else, but I don't know to what end. That's why it's so hard to
I've been saying I don't think they're trying to tell the same story necessarily. I think OG is supposed to be like, the theme is about like life and its grief and how to move on, because life isn't fair. Sometimes people die suddenly for what feels like no reason. It's not justified. Like Sephiroth killed Aerith on a fucking detour. It was nothing to him. It wasn't. It was just because she was an annoyance. Like, and he didn't think it was gonna impact Cloud. He was just like, you actually give a shit that I just killed this bitch, this girl? Like, you. Like, why are you sad? You're literally a puppet. Get over it. Like, it was literally for, like, it meant nothing to him. And that was part of the rage and the tragedy and being upset, is like, this girl talked about the future more than anyone. So to me, I think in the original game, we weren't meant to think of it as her fate. It was supposed to be, life is so unfair. And how do you move on with that? How do you allow yourself to move on and be okay with that? And same with Cloud's identity crisis, right? Like, how do I accept things that I don't like about myself or things that are traumatic? How do I move to acceptance and then go on? And I think what's going on with Rebirth or the remake trilogy is the theme is more about saying, like, you can't tell me what my life is supposed to look like. I'm going to decide what my life looks like. And I think it's happening with Aerith because she knows she's a Cetra. She knows in the original timeline she's supposed to die. And to me, we keep going in on Aerith's feelings of anger. She's mad about the position she has in life, that all the things that have been taken from her. And I think part of her is angry that she knows she's going to die. And so I think for her, even though she's accepting it because she's the last Cetra and she knows, like, it's the right thing to do. I need to do this. It's my duty. I think part of her doesn't want to. She doesn't want to fucking die. She wants to have a life and be a normal person and have friends and family. And then with Cloud, you know, he doesn't want to lose her this time around. And none of these characters want a life that isn't theirs. Same with Zack. He keeps on talking about that. Like, I wanted a choice. And so this is how I got here. And he was trying to tell Biggs that. So I think it's more about saying, nobody can tell you how your life is supposed to work. Not fate, not the universe, nothing. And that's why we're trying to defy it.
And I do think there were elements of that in the original for sure. Like, I think Cloud's journey is very much centered in that, in terms of, you know, he ends up defining himself by the fact that he just became a regular Shinra grunt. And like that seems to lead him down a certain path, and in the end he ends up sort of overcoming that and defeating Sephiroth. He wasn't even good enough to make soldier, and then he kills the greatest soldier that ever lived. Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, that doesn't.
A man who became God.
Yeah. So I think that's a thread they're pulling, and to build on what Lily was saying, the thing about fate, like, that comes up in the theme song, right? In No Promises. I was like listening back to the full version and all the lyrics, and she talks about, basically at the start of the song, she's talking about how, like, the crowds of people, and they're all kind of like blissfully unaware of sort of the larger fate and what like, they're just kind of living their lives at their own rhythm. Like, she feels like she's jealous that they have sort of control over their day-to-day lives, where she, as a Cetra, she doesn't say this, but it's kind of the subtext of the song. Like, she's talking about basically kind of being jealous and wishing she had that ability to sort of just like live life without a care. Obviously, and I think that's the great tragedy of Rebirth, So it's like, that's again like the thing of like, is it a good ending or not? It's like, in terms of, I think it is incredibly tragic that all throughout the game, she's throughout the different worlds, throughout the different realities, it seems like there's this meta Aerith plan to like not make this thing happen. She has a sort of like empty holy materia, and then she gets it through this like back end relay system from a different Aerith.
4D chess.
Yeah, she's playing this sort of game of chess, but she probably doesn't really want to do it. That's why she also is like actively trying to stop Cloud from having the black materia, but in the end, she sort of like has to give in, and rather than fight Cloud over it, she's like, okay, here, you know, like she
whatever happens.
Yeah, like I won't blame you or something like that. Yeah.
It seems like she's trying to stop it, but then had to eventually give into it. And there's a real tragedy to that, especially because they stopped Fate, right? Like that was the end of part 1, is like they put an end to Fate as they knew it, and yet here they are sort of at Fate's whim again. So it's, and I think the third game is going to be about them finally sort of overcoming and finally putting having their own agency over the end point of whatever the final game is. But yeah, so I do think there's something really good. It's just, it is different, right? To Lily's point of like, is it the same story or not? And they've said it, you know, people bring up the interviews, and it's all leading to Advent Children. It's all leading to blah, blah, blah. It says it's going to be the same. They said it's going to be the same crux of the story, right? I've talked about it in one of my videos of like the plot versus the story. And I actually think I may have gotten swapped. I think that they're doing a lot of the same plot points, but the story is going to be a little bit different. So yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah, it's I guess where I'm to your point, if that is their objective, if that is their like their overall their overarching theme of what they're trying to convey here, it's about fate. It's about like not, not being told what you are going to do. And I think it was like even Katase saying at one point, like, well, he made a comment about like that's what this is all about, fate, and what did he say? If you could stop fate, would you, or something like that? I don't know. I don't really remember the exact quote, but the word fate keeps getting thrown around, and I think it was kind of like it's a me thing, or it's a whoever resonates with me on this side of things, where it's like I don't think I ever got that from the original. Like it was there elements of it. But I don't think that was not my takeaway from it. And I think that's where the divide comes in, where like there's the division between the fandom in that sense, where it's like, but that's not what we took from the game, where it's like the creators are like, yeah, but that's what we're trying to tell you. Like, that's what we want to tell you. That's what we were always trying to tell you. Maybe, I don't know, but where it's like, I don't know, man. At the end of chapter 13, that was what I took from the game. Well, like that's where what it's all about. But
the only real moment in OG, and I had forgotten about it until I recently replayed the game. And I played the game in 2019 before Remake came out. It's like, I'm sure a lot of us did like right before it, and I completely forgot about it from then too. But Bugenhagen talks about fate when he's talking to Red 13 when he sees Seto, and he's like, even if Cloud and his team were successful and they stop Meteor and they stop Sephiroth, the fate of the planet is sort of like doomed and it's sealed, and presumably because of Jenova, and like I do think they need to get to an endpoint. Maybe I think they're pushing toward an endpoint of getting rid of Jenova overall. Maybe
that's where I'm at with it too. Yeah.
That's the only time that fate is really brought up in the original game, and weirdly enough, they didn't have that scene in this game. Like we get Bugenhagen, and basically is like, I don't know a damn thing.
Yeah, that was weird. I was expecting to get I was expecting Bugenhagen to be the one that was telling us all about the multiverses and stuff. I thought he was going to be like, listen, I know what's going on.
I thought he was like, I liked how kooky he was.
Yeah.
Because he was that way in the original too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I expected him to know a little bit more, and I do think it might come back because we do have another Bugenhagen scene, at least in part 3 of the original, where you go back to Forgotten Capital and whatnot, and he
for the key. Right?
I think they could be doing something interesting, especially in terms of like Tifa's role in the story, of like, because she's really the instigator of things, and she's the one who asked Bugenhagen something, and Bugenhagen's like, I don't know, but it seems like he stews on it a little bit, and so in part 3 he may actually have an answer for Tifa. because he might crack something open, and that might help the party. But I don't know.
Yeah, so there's like I guess the question is I want to talk about the timeline itself. Like, let's talk about those alternate timelines, or the multiverse is a word that I've been hearing being used, and I think I've even used it too. Multiverse for me always ends up not working for me. So like I think that was kind of one of the riffs I had with this ending as well, is just be like, I knew it was coming. Like I had we've been talking about Beagleverse, Terrierverse. We've been talking about this stuff, the timelines. So for me, I kind of gone on this I don't know, personal like mission to try and like say that multiverse isn't what we're saying. When he says worlds, he's not referring to an actual literal world. And like he does say, like Sephiroth says, it all encompasses the planet, like it all returns to the planet. And then it was even Sephiroth saying that they're errant worlds, like they don't belong, they're not, like almost as if to say that they are a mistake, they're an error, they don't, like when they die, they're not to be mourned, they're just. Is
that like the Gi maybe? Is that?
No, I'm talking about like, so the timelines that Zack are in, like, and we actually saw multiple timelines end, like, or those worlds actually end, which was another.
We at least saw Zack's ends for sure, because the meteor got it.
Yeah, and then we see when Sephiroth comes in and actually finishes Aerith off in the church, pushes Cloud in. I'm assuming that world ends as well, if it's not the same exact world that Cloud or Zack sees end. But we've seen some ending. We've even seen Sephiroth absorb that world, like literally just take that world in and say, that's mine now, like I have that power. But it doesn't seem to be enough, like, because that was an entire mission in the original game. That's what Sephiroth wanted to do. So he's done it in this world where it ended, and it didn't seem to be enough for him. But it was kind of like he's absorbing these worlds, it feels like, and they're mistakes, they're errors. I feel like that is part of the live stream, and I feel like those worlds are happening within the live stream, rather than, like, it's not a universe we're looking at. We're not seeing different universes with different planets in it.
Different memories of the current world.
It's
because the live stream is memories.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's splintered. Like the live stream was supposed to be, I think it was even said, it's this flow that travels through space time. Like it's just it's always flowing. But when something happens that wasn't supposed to happen, it's splintered. Like it broke apart. But it's still the live stream.
Yeah, I do think they have that. There is sort of a, I don't know the exact scientific term, but you were asking about it earlier in terms of like how does it work exactly? And I don't know if I have the best answer, and I imagine probably the best answer will inevitably come from somebody like Sleep Easy. But like the way that I understand it right now is when there is an event that breaks fate, it then creates sort of another world, and those things can happen at different start times almost, because at first I understood that generally, but then the Zack thing sort of threw me off, because I thought like the sort of point of origin was the end of Remake. That's why everything still lines up, right? That's why like all the different
and there's
worlds
only one Zack.
Yeah.
Just
that's
by the way.
Oh, is there?
Yeah, because the world that he was in is destroyed, and Aerith grabs him and puts him in the other one.
Oh, now, yeah. But not throughout the game. Throughout the game, it seemed like there were multiple Zacks, because there was a Zack with the ribbon on his hand. There was a Zack.
Oh yeah, because it was showing whether he decided to save Cloud or to go save Biggs. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he doesn't make it in the reactor. I mean, he jumps off, but I feel like I feel like he gets transported. Like he gets
transported a few times actually, because Sephiroth throws him out too.
The only one that we don't see is when he goes to visit Hojo. Like we don't see what happens there. Like that's kind of curious when he does actually make the decision.
I think Zack he survives into one, like he walks into one timeline, and then we see him splinter, and then he comes back.
Yeah. The only Zack that the Zack that I think we're dealing with is the indecisive Zack who is at the church. Where
he's
Sephiroth
like
walks
Shiba
past.
Zack or something.
Yeah, because Sephiroth's sort of like not you and throws him back, and then he ends up in like the black life stream, I assume.
And that's when he ends up in Edge of Creation, isn't it?
That's how he ends up in Edge of Creation, and then after the battle ends up back in the church, and then the meteor comes down. But then before that finally ends, it seems like Aerith or
Grabs
someone, because
him.
it's like a white, like pulls him down into whatever reality he's in now.
Yeah, so
which
Aerith is
Beagleverse
actually
might be some other.
transferring Cloud and Zack in between worlds as well as Sephiroth, moving them between worlds. Whenever they go between worlds, it's always it seems
Baby
as though
Seal,
it's always whispered.
Baby Seal in chat. I'm impressed at how wrong you guys all are.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, I don't know, man. It's there's a lot going on with that, with the whole worlds, but stuff. I just don't like using the word multiverse, where I just kind of go with it being within the live stream itself. It's not actually for anybody who's kind of confused, or maybe I'm completely wrong, but I'm trying to help them put it together. Where they say maybe whenever you think about a multiverse, you're thinking about multiple universes where these are happening, and then like the planet is dying over here in this universe, but it's really happening within the planet. Like it's still one world, one planet. He's just saying worlds, which is another way to say.
Yeah, Sephiroth also says like that all he explains the different worlds, and it says, but they're all tied to the live
planet.
stream or the planet.
It's so weird.
So
yeah.
It's kind of more like a butterfly effect in like its own weird way, because like we saw how it can be little decisions like Zack choosing Biggs or Cloud, and that creates whole new timelines. So it's kind of like a butterfly effect of this creates this whole reality, and then it might have to come back around. So that's like we get the two Zacks, and then they come back into the one Zack.
Yeah.
What's interesting though is that they're not like equal worlds in a lot of ways, because when Biggs ends up at that reactor 6, he's like, it's all dried up. There's no life stream, and we know that in the Terrier world,
it doesn't have an impact.
Yeah, there's no like life, like all the leaves or all the plants are dying and whatnot. Like, there's no life stream seemingly.
Does that mean Biggs really doesn't have an impact on the story?
Damn.
Because his story ended like shortly after. There was no live stream. If there's no live stream, and they're like, yeah, this has you living has no significant impact on the world. So that's so
let's
sad.
bring him back. Bring him back to hype everybody up. Biggs is back in this game just to show him that he is insignificant.
That brings up a good question in terms of the significance of certain characters.
Yeah.
I'm curious about your guys' take on the Zack arc and what they did with him in Rebirth.
So are you talking like what is the question specifically?
The totality of like how they ended up using Zack. Obviously, there's been so much conversation over the past 4 years before Rebirth, and like how they used it. I guess I'll chime in first to like set the table. It's so weird. Like, I don't know. I directly after finishing the game, I was very much like, I don't even think you even needed a lot of these Zack scenes. You probably could have told much of the same story without having any of these Zack scenes. Because ultimately it kind of doesn't matter. In terms of like the core narrative of like Cloud's journey and whatnot. But then, and you can even, funnily enough, apparently on replay, you can go into extra settings and you can have it like skip all the Zack scenes. It's like, that's kind of a damning
That's rough,
commentary on the role of those scenes. But I do understand why they probably felt like they needed to have it in terms of explaining the
multiverse,
multiple worlds, like multiple worlds, multiverse timelines. They're all kind of potato to me, to be honest. But like, I know that there's probably
there's a theme,
very minor differences between them that make them a little more. But like, just as human beings talk for the sake of like making it easy, it doesn't really matter to me what word is used. But so like in his world is the first time that you see the creation of a new world. With the sort of like rainbow in the tunnel thing. So it's like through the lens of him and his story, you sort of get a better understanding of like what Sephiroth ends up explaining. So I get I get the mechanical role of it there, but it feels a little bit underwhelming in terms of like how they leveraged him. But at the same time, I also don't want him to play too central of a role, if I'm being completely honest, because I think it can end up distracting from it. And like I do think, yeah, in part 3, it seems like they're setting him up to, but who knows? Because they made a big deal out of it going into this game. He was on the cover, and then he ends up being in like 30 minutes total of cutscenes. So it's like,
Yeah.
you know, I really have no idea what to make of it.
I'm pretty. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I don't know if you were still. I'm about to take us somewhere else. So
oh,
whatever you were about to say.
No, like on the topic of Zack and like my thoughts on that. I just feel like there's something there. Like we have to go back and we have to watch every scene carefully, because I am under the like just assumption that everything that's put into the game needs to be in that game. Like it needs to be there. There's got to be a reason why, and for right now, I mean, this is our first playthrough, so that's why we're all like, you know, we got questions and stuff. It's because we haven't replayed it 100,000 times like we did with Remake. We don't have all the answers right now. But some answers could be obvious, and then we're still missing it. So I think with Zack, it's something along the lines of that we're going to have to go back and watch his scenes carefully. If anything, I do believe that Zack's scenes are to kind of add to the overall theme of the game in some way of like I get that there's something to deal with choice. Like he says it to Biggs, I wanted to feel like I had control over my life, and we saw that multiple times. We've seen it like where Aerith tries to have control over her life. We've seen Cloud try to save Sephiroth. So there was something to deal with that where they're trying to have control over their lives, where like fate doesn't control them. And that was kind of what was going. Biggs talks about it a lot in those scenes. Then they did give you the option to turn it off, and I was like, damn, that really does kind of not look good. But it really does seem like all Zack's purpose was to show you like, hey, there are multiple timelines. Zack is in them. He seems to be being transported by Aerith through these timelines, or the White Whispers, whoever that is. I'm assuming is Aerith. It could be Minerva, like it could be the live stream itself, the planet itself, but I don't know why. But yeah, I mean, like it seems that was the whole purpose, to show that hey, Zack is there. And then my least favorite thing of the entire game kind of culminates with Zack at the very end. This is, out of all of the complaints I've made, they could stick with everything they did, but this part rubs me really like the wrong way. I'm like, no. Zack's sitting in the church after that whole sequence goes down where Cloud saves Aerith. Did he? No, he didn't. Wait, what's going on? And then we see Zack sitting in a church where flowers are blooming. The whole time these flowers are dead because Aerith is not there. So flowers are blooming, indicating that Aerith is alive here in this timeline. This is what I'm thinking. I'm like, oh, okay, so now Zack and Aerith are finally in a world together where both are alive, not just in a coma, like both of them are alive. It could be the universe where Cloud saved Aerith. Does Zack wake up in that universe, or that timeline, or whatever you want to call it, the world? And then he says, well, as worlds part, who's to say they can't merge again? And I'm like, I hate that so much. Like, where it's like, it kind of gives you this, I don't know if for some people it could be hope. It could be like, oh, I can't wait for that to happen. But for me, I'm like, that really removes a lot of everything. And it is leaning towards that fate theme that it seems to be at odds with my belief of the game and versus the creators of what they're focusing on, fate, versus I focus on, hey, loss. This is, like final death is fine. It's final. It's death is something that, it's sudden. It sucks. Like Lully said earlier about like how to deal with this kind of stuff. It's unfair. Where now it's like, hey, Zack is waking up in a world that seems like Aerith is part of that world. They could merge again. Could they have a ending? And this is me getting ahead of myself, getting ahead of the story, which is something I want to refrain from doing. But it does get me to the point where I start having to think ahead, and I'm like, oh no, that is a possibility, where Zack brings Aerith back into the worlds merge, and then hey, now we have the full party. Zack, Aerith, Cloud, everybody's together once again, and we can take down Jenova and Sephiroth together, and we can walk into the sunset. Everybody's happy. Nobody died. Everybody's in control of their fate. And it's just kind of like that. When I think ahead like that, that's when I start getting like, I get that like pit in my stomach, and I'm just like, no, God, no, why would they do that?
I have a possible idea for where they might be going with this that might actually lead us to a bittersweet ending. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, because we are still going so deep into fighting fate and trying to save the planet, and then we learn all this stuff from the Gi about how, like, people not born of the live stream cannot go back. We know that Jenova has been playing the long con. She's been doing this for however long. We know that this Sephiroth is like Advent Children Sephiroth or post-Advent Children Sephiroth. We know that until we get rid of Jenova, she can't, like, we have to get her off the whole damn planet. She's got to be gone. So what if in part 3, we have to have all these characters from these broken timelines who are going to go together to try to remove Jenova, but they're going to come to the conclusion, we got to get rid of Jenova. That's the only way, because they're going to keep making these timelines and go, what, now it's like broken. There's too many timelines. And so the only answer is going to be, we got to get rid of Jenova. And that also means that when they all merge, some people are going to have to die with their timeline. And so they're going to have that teary goodbye where Zack and Aerith are like, we got to go. And it sucks. And I hate this.
Yeah, I like that. And then you can also kind of get an inside look of Aerith using Holy within the live stream, or like it's the battle of the live stream. We get to see Aerith and Zack. I'm more along that lines of like, okay, if you want Aerith to be in part 3 and you still have this prominent, appearances in this game, that's fine with me. If it is like, this is what's happening in the live stream. This is Aerith summoning Holy, or finishing off the summoning of Holy. This is Aerith bringing live stream up to save the planet and all that other stuff, but from within the live stream. I'm cool with that. It then when you're talking about, actually kind of feeds into my theory that I've actually had since the end of Remake, where I was like, the reunion needs to happen. Like, this time around, the reunion needs to happen. To where, like we talked about, the end game of this series seems to be pointing towards, we need to get rid of Jenova. The only way to get rid of Jenova is to allow her to become whole again. We can't have the virus spreading everywhere. We need to have the virus all in one place so we can destroy it completely and not go anywhere. So the only way to do that, Sephiroth says, the reunion, when worlds merge, my fragmented mother will become whole again. Everything will become
because now there's
one
multiple
again.
timeline Genovas too.
There's that as well, right? So now we need that reunion to happen in order to fix the multiverse. In order to fix all of these, we need the reunion to happen in order to bring Jenova together. But what's going to happen there is we're going to see a Jenova that is whole again, which means a Jenova that is at the height of her power. This is the one that almost
That's
wiped
the big
out,
boss.
Yeah, they almost wiped out the Cetra 2,000 years ago. Did wipe out the Cetra pretty much. And it's like, this is the Jenova that is going to be, wait a second, did Sephiroth just become, like, did he drop down a tier when this happens? Or what's going to happen there? Which has me thinking, oh, maybe Sephiroth gets...
She might consume him.
Yeah, consume. Like, yeah, get rid of
because
Sephiroth.
He's got her DNA, so why wouldn't she? She's using him right now, so why not be like, all right, I'm coming back together, you're all coming inside, and then
honestly,
what's that going to mean for Cloud and Zack?
I do love... Yeah, I do love how they built up Jenova more clearly than in the original. Obviously, she was always there in the original, but like, in terms of the distinction between her and Sephiroth and whatnot, and her place in the world, it felt a little less than Sephiroth, which is fine because he's a great villain. But like, I was rewatching the Temple earlier today, where you're walking through and the Cetra are sort of explaining what Jenova did to them and how it's sort of oh, that was another thing. So like it explains how the Jenova basically tricked them, and so we're gonna get a lot more of that. I think, as I mentioned, I think we make it like a Jenova Aerith and whatnot. But also there was a conversation of how like they ended up defeating Jenova, but then because of like grief and other issues, like that ultimately led to their demise as a people, and it still ended up upending their civilization. So it also plays into the thing I was talking about earlier of like Aerith trying to deny Sephiroth those emotions from Cloud, because like if grief still ends up, grief and rage still ends up the predominant thing, it could be used against them and lead to sort of another sort of negative thing. The other thing though I was thinking about was that promotional line in a few of the trailers of the world will be saved, but will you? That also was on my mind when Loli and you were talking just now about the ultimate fate of everything and having to create one merged world, and then what happens to like a Zack and an Aerith and whatnot. Because that line is interesting, but I don't know if it was 100% paid off within this game. She has that moment in the dream date where she says, this is about saving the world and you. Yeah. But it doesn't seem like an open question in quite the way that it was in that promotional line. So I wonder if that's like an overarching trilogy question or if that's something else. I don't know.
I just thought about something too. If Hollow is Cloud to Aerith, and if No Promises to Keep is Aerith to Cloud, and they're both saying I'll never let you go, maybe I'm right. Maybe the third part is going to be them having to come to terms with the fact that they have to let each other go because they have to bring the timelines back together, and that means Aerith isn't going to exist anymore, at least not alive. She's going to go back to the live stream.
So she could be in that in the timeline now that is ending when Cloud looks up in the sky and sees the rift in the sky. That's because he's seeing her her world now. But then nobody else is seeing her world. Cloud is only seeing her world every now and then. And when he looks up, he can see into a different world where that the party's like, no, this world's fine. Like, there's no rift in our sky. And I don't think it's a lot of the breakdowns I watched. I think people were thinking that their world was going to end, like indicating that the world that the party is in is going to end. And I'm like, I don't think that's the case. I think Cloud is looking into Aerith's world where she was saved. I'm interested because Baby Seal says that he doesn't think that there's any timeline or any indication that Aerith lives. Like it's actually where's it at? I feel confident that Cloud didn't save Aerith in any reality. The delusion that he was fed to him by Aerith is feeding him that delusion. That's interesting. I would agree with that if it wasn't for the big beam of light that popped off when he did that. But yeah, I mean,
the
like
rainbow thing is confusing. Yeah,
the rainbow thing
would make you seem to indicate.
He steps into a ring of rainbow.
I know Baby Seal has like tweeted that before too, and I don't know. I think it would take a conversation with him to get the understanding of what he's seeing in that. But like, I struggle with that as well because like there is that moment when the sword clashes that is the same visual language as everything else, and so it feels like a little bit of breaking the contract that you have with the viewer if that's just misdirection. Unless it's like a well-explained misdirection. I don't know.
That just feels like Game of Thrones writing to me, which I know Nojima said he likes, but I think is like an insult to your audience personally. So
what's the Game of Thrones stuff? Like
but when your audience theorizes correctly based on the hints you gave them, instead of rewarding them for paying attention to the world you have created, you punish them by changing it last minute and make everyone do reshoots and shit. Yeah. That makes me freaking angry.
Maybe
and I do know that they have most of part 3 written, but they said there are some things they are willing to change depending on viewers' reactions, and that's kind of like, I am so like, when he said that he was really inspired by Game of Thrones, I was like, that's scary. That's terrifying to me as someone who loves writers. Someone who loves that stuff. I hate when you punish your audience for paying attention. You're treating them like a like your enemies, and they're not.
Is that
you shouldn't
true,
punish
though?
them.
Is that like true for George R. R. Martin? Like, is that actually
Not George R. R. Martin. It's true for the writers of the show.
Oh, for the show. Oh, okay.
Yeah, because the show is way different than the books.
The show.
Yeah, the show, and he said he had watched it. I don't know if he read it or watched it, but when I heard that, I was like, that is horrible.
That okay. Okay, I understand the sentiment. I just never heard of that before, so that's I understand that for sure. But yeah, I don't know. Like I said at the top of the show, I really do feel like this was two different minds. That's what it really felt like. Because I mean, I want to talk about like the rest of the stuff that we really loved about it as well. But to go back, somebody asked the question. Had a question for the panel. Here we go. Sia says, by the way, there is one thing I did not understand, and I hope the panel can help here. Was it hinted that Glenn is Sephiroth's father? That's okay. That actually threw me for a loop, because usually the ongoing kind of theory or whatever is that he's Cloud's father. So maybe, I don't know if that was, you meant to say Cloud, or you really did think Sephiroth, but I mean, it seemed, when he says like the sins of our fathers, it almost seemed as if like, hey, this is a double meaning. We're talking about my father and your father, Rufus Shinra. Like, we're talking about President Shinra from before. Something like that. He said something along those lines. But I don't really know. When it comes to the Glenn thing, and I heard this when Night Sky Prince said it in his story breakdown, where Night Sky Prince was like, I'll come back to this another time. It's literally the most uninteresting thing about the game. Where it's just kind of like, I agree. I was like, I'm not really... I also thought it was weird placement to have... We had this really supposed to be an emotional scene, like this really like big scene that everybody was waiting for. This was the moment. And then after that, we show the big reveal, like a big reveal that Glenn is actually Sephiroth. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like,
well, he's a Jenova. The way I interpreted it was just a Jenova sort of manipulation or mimicry. Like, Jenova uses people you love, hate, whatever. So Glenn is someone from Rufus's past, as they established within the lore, that Rufus kills him at some point in the past. I don't even think they've gotten to that point in Ever Crisis, but like, he kills him in the past, and so it's someone that he's familiar with. So Jenova uses that image to interact with Rufus and sort of manipulate things. That's why after Rufus calls him out, he then transforms into Sephiroth, because he's like, oh yes, you see kind of the shell game that's happening here, and then eventually when he's dead, it ends up just becoming one of the clones. Like, it was always just, you know, Jenova visions, or not visions, but the shape-shifting that Jenova's capable of in order to interact with Rufus and sort of like puppeteer things in her favor.
Yeah, so like, yeah, that's a thing that happened. Is really kind of what I was like, where it all came down for me, was that scene, that big reveal was just kind of like, okay, cool.
Placement of it's weird. They have a lot of that within, I think, the series as a whole. Like, the other one was, it's part of the reason why it's hard to sometimes wonder or like speculate that like, oh, this thing that feels weird now, maybe it'll work in part 3, is because, for example, in the Platefall in the first game where we see Kate Sith, they didn't really pay that off that interestingly or in any real direct way. Like, I thought maybe he might have to explain, you know, how he, kind of like he does in the original game at one point after he like lies to the party and everything, he has this moment where he says, like, you know, seeing how you guys operate, it really makes me rethink my allegiances, or whatever exactly he says. And I could have imagined within that spiel, he goes, you know, I remember running out during, you know, Platefall and seeing it happen, and they cut back and they call back to that scene.
Yeah.
But now it's like, they didn't even do anything really with it. So in part 1, you have this weird moment that just presumably was just to introduce the visual of the character, but then they didn't even really do anything much with it in Rebirth specific to that. So it's like, why interrupt one of the most emotionally raw moments with like this Kate Sith thing that they could have easily cut it out. It would have had no weight on Rebirth. It would have, like, that's why sometimes it just feels like they're throwing everything in there and you're just like, why though? You know?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of it being Glenn either, with it being like a gacha game. Just kind of, this character from the latest gacha game, it almost felt like an advertisement that I was like not sure how I felt about why he's here.
I thought there was something potentially interesting with
There
Glenn.
could have
I'll do
been
like
something there, yeah.
I'll run the Glenn defense thing here, even though I have plenty of criticisms.
Yeah.
Or wait.
Yeah, I just saw Ethan mentioned it because how many people are familiar with what's it called? I can't remember the name of it. It was like not Ever Crisis. No, it's not Last Order because that was the animation. It was
Soldier?
Before Crisis. Thank you.
Before Crisis.
And there's a whole backstory about Rufus and Wutai.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Viceroy Saruf specifically.
Is there?
I don't know all the details, but that is a callback to that mobile game from like
that.
more than 10 years ago.
Something to look into. So Viceroy Saruf, so Ethan Menard says that make sure everyone here knows that Rufus is Viceroy Saruf. I actually don't think so. And I've heard that actually bouncing around quite a bit, where like they're Rufus. It's actually it almost seems like an anagram or like
I think
a
the name.
It
I think
is.
the name in
It
Japan,
is.
in Japanese, it's a direct.
Oh, is it?
He is Viceroy. Yes, Rufus is Viceroy.
He
Saruf,
is indeed?
like canonically. Yes.
Oh, okay,
Because he was
cool.
funding. He was. Okay. Do you want me to tell you this?
Sure. Yeah. This is before Crisis.
So Rufus was funding Avalanche during the Wutai,
Got
like
it. So
either
that was
during the
before
Wutai War or
Crisis then.
shortly leading up to it. Yes,
and he
was.
went under the name Viceroy Saruf. Okay, so I knew about
He
that
was
whole
trying
thing.
to like I don't know all the details. Like I said, I didn't play it, so I only know vague details. But I'm pretty sure it was specifically to get to basically fuck over his dad
Yes.
and to try to gain power.
I knew about all
So-
of that. I just didn't know he went under
I didn't know
the
about
name
the Viceroy character,
Saruf,
yeah.
Yeah,
And like, of
that's
course,
that's
either.
why
I
you
knew
don't
the
see him on the
Rufus thing,
TV
yeah.
because it was Rufus.
Yeah.
That's why he never appears.
He was just taunting him
Well,
with
thank
it.
you for that.
Yeah, and I had
information.
forgotten all about that until someone on Twitter mentioned it. I was like, "Oh my god!" I was like, "I forgot all about it."
Thank you for I was gonna say thank you for bringing that to my attention because I was actually trying to work out some sort of theory that it was actually Goto Kisaragi. Like I thought it was actually him trying to do something. So that works out great. All right, thank you for that. But yeah, and then before Crisis, this is covered for Saya saying that the Before Crisis also explains what happens in Calm, which is another like Calm was bombed, and Shinra tries to cover it up, another cover up thing. That's where everybody was kind of thinking Verdot was going to be in this game. Broden is a connection to Before Crisis as well, I guess.
Yeah, and
Maybe he
Cisne,
has some
I think,
sort of-
originally came from Before Crisis as well, before
Yes.
she was in Crisis Core.
I think so. So yeah, all right. So let's get into. Is there anything else you guys have like that you really, really want to talk about when it comes to? Yeah.
I want to mention one thing, and it has to do with that patch that they did for Integrate,
yes,
where
this
they
is a good one.
changed
Mhm.
I
Aerith's
wonder if you're
line.
bringing up the same thing.
I
I'm
wanted
thinking
to
of. Yeah.
because I think this kind of shows us that we do have at least hive mind Aerith, or Aerith knows a lot of shit that she shouldn't know at this point in the game, because originally they localized it for her to say like I miss it, the steel sky, which I think when they first got that line, when they were like, here, this is the line translated to English, they thought it was a callback to Crisis Core, and that's why they translated it that way. But then when they got everything for Rebirth, they're like, oh, we completely misunderstood this plot point. And so they changed it for her to say, what was it, like, the sky, I don't
think
like it.
Yeah, it's the sky, I don't like it, which I
Yeah.
do think is the more direct translation of
Yeah,
the line originally.
it's closer
at the end of
to
Remake.
what they say in Japanese, yeah. And I think it's because she can see that tear in
Yeah.
the sky after everything happens, and she knows she's the only one that can see it.
Yeah, they talked about it, and I think it's not just a callback to Crisis Core. I think it's also a callback to within Remake when they're hopping the roofs. Cloud and her are talking, and she's like, "I've never left Midgar," and she's like, "I'm afraid of like the sky," or like she references like the steel sky, how it gives her like security and whatnot. So like. I think it was like it definitely probably was relating back to Crisis Core, but I think it also was relating to like that conversation within Remake itself. So you don't always have to have compilation knowledge to sort of make sense of the lines.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think for sure it's literally the one other thing I was going to bring up.
Yeah.
That was top of mind was like, does Aerith see the rift at the end of Remake? Because that line of the sky, I don't like it, makes more sense under that.
It definitely adds a lot of intrigue to Aerith in general,
Yeah.
too.
And like why they would specifically have to patch it, like when I because like it makes more. The only true explanation feels like that they would have to patch it for that reason, is
For
to
lore
have it
reasons.
make more sense going
Yeah, because
back.
there's plenty of things that aren't localized like great. Like, I'm not one of those people that hates on localization because I speak 2 languages, so I know exactly. Like, I used to do translations. I know exactly how it works. So I don't rag on people for localization, but sometimes it is a little. It's not always great. But they didn't patch all those.
Should we repeat that real quick, Daniel? I know you had to step away for a
Oh,
second.
I stepped away because I feel like I had the idea of where you guys were going with it, but was it about the like the changing the line at the end of the at the
to the sky to the sky. I don't like it, and it's basically the implication being, does Aerith then even see the rift? And I think so.
That would change things for me, what I just said a little bit earlier when I was saying that the rift in the sky is not part of the world that the party is in. That would change, because that would indicate that, yeah, it is actually. And
I do want to do a replay. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I do want to do a replay where I look to see if there are any other weird moments of her looking up, or like
She did look up at the sky after that battle in Mount Corel. On the way up Mount Corel, she took a moment to look back and look at the sky, and it was kind of like, oh, what are you looking back at? You know, like just kind of like, oh, the journey so far, or what are you doing?
Somebody also had a theory based. I don't remember if you shared this with me or not, but how there's often shots that are close up on Aerith's face, or they're always shot from far away when it's Aerith and Cloud together, as if they're being watched by someone, and Aerith will react in a way that makes it seem like she knows she can't go off script, I guess, where she'll be like, yeah, right, and she does that sometimes, so it makes you feel like, yeah, she's definitely playing 4D chess with Sephiroth and making sure he doesn't hear her trying to change things.
I was DMing with someone, they brought it up, and I thought it was an interesting point in terms of like in the specifically during the dream date, she's kind of like careful with her words, and she's always like kind of a little bit of subterfuge with a lot of the things, even during the main game. But I think it's within that date specifically, you see a few shots that are like kind of overhead. And I think and then you see like the feathers kind of falling. And I think it's because she's like always on her toes about what Sephiroth sees and hears.
And even Sephiroth, that's where you've been hiding. Like, I've been looking for you, you know what I mean? Like, you got out of my sight there for a bit. That's actually really cool. I like that observation. It's always purposeful. Like, even the camera work is always purposeful, and that's a great example. Now, man, I feel like we can keep talking about all the mysteries and everything like that. Again, this is just 2 hours of us just. We've only played it once, you know what I mean? So we could probably look back on this stream and go, oh my god, what were we? It was right there in front of us the whole time. What are you talking about? And I'm sure people in the comment section will let me know too, which is great. But yeah, I think I feel like we've covered a lot. And I was going to start maybe moving on to we got a question from Saya. Asking us
I'll be right back.
All right, so I'll pitch it over to you, Lily. So he was asking favorite and least favorite region.
Whew. That's really hard. I still have to complete all of the Nebel region, so I don't have all that. And I'm still working on like side quests and world intel in a couple of them. I actually I do really love the grasslands. I can't lie. I love them so much. They're cozy almost.
Yeah.
I really like them. And like minigame, honestly, it's a basic answer, but Queen's Blood. It's just fun. Like, I can spend hours doing it over and over. Even though I'm hitting the retry button countless times in one go, I still have fun with it. It's a good time.
That's how you play Queen's Blood?
Yeah, the minute I see I'm going to lose, I hit retry.
Yep, exactly. That's how you do it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I got to say, favorite region, it's so tough just because the music of Gongaga is just freaking great. Like, there was a moment where I just put it down. I don't even know what you're telling me. They're like, but I'm like, yeah, man.
Yeah, but you get into it.
Yeah, I'm feeling that. All right, cool, man. Gongaga. You know, I don't know. I was just trying to throw
Whatever.
Gaga in the lyrics. You know, like when it's like ga 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 ga. So da, 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 da. I'm like, yeah, man. So Gaga region had some epic music, great music. But as far as like the favorite to kind of just be in, I still might be Gaga. I'm with you, Lolly, on the grasslands, just because that was the moment where you're just like, oh man, they did it. This is great. And the grasslands kind of includes the Midgar area as well. And yeah, those regions are fantastic. I was a little let down on the Cosmo Canyon region. So like you said, what was your least? I was let down on the Cosmo Canyon, but then again, not much you really could do with a big canyon. But like the town itself, like Cosmo Canyon Village itself, was amazing to see. So, and then also there was the moment where you fly in into the Cosmo Canyon region. That was one of my favorite moments in the game, even if it was for like this fleeting moment of greatness, like the camera panned around and I'm like, oh my god, are they gonna let me fly this thing? Oh my god! And then I was flying it for a bit, and I was like, it's not letting me do anything, but I like it. I feel like I'm doing something.
It was like the first tease of how an airship might work, and it's like, oh god, it was so exciting.
I was sitting there just smiling.
And I think it's funny because I know that they already showed it to us in State of Play, and I know Subtext didn't watch State of Play purposefully, but like
I watched it now.
Yeah, you've seen it now, but when we got that shot of Temple of the Ancients. Oh my god, I was breathless.
I saw it in game. You're talking about how it like forms.
Yes, and I was so breathless. I was like, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. So even though I had already seen it in State of Play, seeing it again in game, I was just like, I could cry because I was like, they made this so much larger than life than I thought was possible.
Yeah.
And they did it perfect. Even inside, when you go inside, you're like, how are they gonna do this? And they did it. They did it. It was perfect. And the battle music, it gives me chills.
Oh yeah. I clipped the battle music because I was in a moment where I was like up in the air with Cloud and Temple of the Ancients,
you get
like
that
hacking
motif,
something
like,
up and just like, it was so good.
Yes.
And I want to say, because there's been a lot of conversation around Chapter 13, mostly the length of it, I think.
Yeah.
It was long, yeah.
And it's like, it's long. I think there was one too many Turk battles. It was the sung. It was like, we do the Rude and Reno one again, and then there's like, then you get Sung and Elena. It's like,
it was
kind of do another one of these.
Similar, except for different weaknesses to different. Like it was almost a very similar fight where you want to,
especially because we just had a Turk fight in Chapter 12.
Elena's voice actress though, during like her battle screeches make those battles worth it though, because she like went all in. I was like, man, your throat has to hurt from screaming like that, girl.
Yeah.
I would have preferred if they like condensed, because we get two Turks battles within the temple, where it's the Reno and Rude, and we already had fought Rude twice before in the game, I believe, in the mines and then in the Gold Saucer. And Elena, obviously, we had fought twice before that, but Sung and Reno were the new ones. So I wouldn't have minded if there was like a new battle with like Sung and Reno. It's just like having to fight Rude and Elena again. It just like felt a little excessive. But I loved the temple. I freaking loved the design of it. I thought it was so interesting to have the flipping of orientation as like a puzzle. I would imagine that some people don't like that, but I really, really liked everything about the structure of the temple. I thought it was kind of, actually, that was another thing I really liked about the game overall. I wrote that in a note of like, I actually feel like, as much in your face as they are at times, especially in the ending, like I think they handle a lot of things with such a nice light touch. There's almost like a subtlety to some things. Like the Time Guardian thing wasn't this massive thing, but there's like a fun callback to where it's like several hours earlier, and you're seeing like the time thing spin, or
also
where
the trials
thing was. The trials was also a reference to like that turning room.
It actually has the clock on the ground.
Yeah. And like sending you to the past in like an interesting way to experience sort of those trauma. Like there's, I thought that was ingenious, but it's not overstated. It's not like it's not crazy in your face. Like there's no like exposition of like, I am the Time Guardian, and now we're, like it just kind of happens. And I think that's really good. I think like the to some extent I kind of like that Bugenhagen wasn't so omniscient of everything. and that he has maybe some things to learn. Maybe he'll come back in part 3 with something to add. I like the yellow flowers thing was such a big thing in the in part 1, but like the references here were kind of light touch, like in terms of
follow
obviously
the flowers.
yeah, the flowers at the very end. When you're on the date with Aerith, you get the pin of the yellow flowers that she wears. Like
Zack
it's
follows
not totally
the
in your
flowers.
face.
Zach follows them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like that it was there, but it wasn't like so
Overstated.
frontal, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we got let's see. Nori says that the favorite was Junon. I love Junon as well, because I feel like that was really visually interesting, with Junon having so many different layers, the mountain climbing, with the chocobos, the shipwrecks, and being able to actually go out there to them, the overlook where Kyrie is. I thought all of that was really great too. So that's up there too. Joel says,
were we talking about areas to explore? Is that what the question was?
I
Like
think
favorite
so. I'm just
or...
kind of going through and like bringing in chat. And like
I did want to
we
say
were talking about towns and the areas and stuff. Yeah.
I do want to say 2 quick things because I ran out, but like I'll make them super quick.
Yeah.
I will defend Gongaga. I think Gongaga is super fun to explore.
Yep.
I think like I love the puzzle element, the environmental puzzle. Like, how do we
too.
get to that thing? Or it's a little annoying because it's a little like it's not RNG, but it's a little random in terms of you can't exactly tell where the mushroom is going to throw you, and that can be frustrating.
That's true.
But I loved like trying to figure out how to get to things in Gongaga.
Me too.
And I also like that in the little bit that I did of Cosmo. I still need to do. I did very, very little in the Cosmo Canyon area. And I did like the Proto Relic quest. That's the only quest line that I did there. And thought that was cool. Did you guys do the Cosmo Canyon Proto Relic quests?
No, I haven't gotten. So
I haven't done them all yet. I don't think.
Those
wait,
are,
no,
those
I did.
Are,
I did do them all actually.
those are really good. It gives you a little more lore and like scenes of like stuff from even remake and that you didn't see. That's like really great.
Like
and yeah, the Junon thing. I loved exploring Junon. And Junon was like going up and down, going like. Cause I just remember the feeling. It was the first like big, oh my god moment for me in the world was in the Junon area. With like the grasslands was all amazing for sure, but like I remember just scaling a few cliffs and then going over a certain edge, and then he gets to go down into like this valley, and then suddenly you just see all these waterfalls and these streams and rivers, and it's just like, oh my god, this feels like this opened up a whole new sort of biome feeling to the Junon area that I didn't know was here. And it just felt like a real world. Like there was so much variety to all the landscapes.
Yes,
it was like, just incredible.
Joel Vincent in chat said like basically they've basically nailed every single location. Generally in this game, we're 12 out of 10 every town you go to, and I'd even extend that out to the regions that you go to. Like all the different biomes, and I think he even has a follow-up question. What do you think what are we gonna see in part 3? It's just like there's more biomes. We have snowy biomes that we haven't gotten to see, but in this game in Rebirth, we got jungle, we got Red Canyon, we got grasslands, just grass, and as far as eye can see, beautiful. And then we got the shipwrecked, lands of Junon. We get freaking the mysterious lands. We get a beach. We get freaking everything. We get an amusement park. That was the one thing about this game that was absolutely probably the best part of the game, if we want to kind of boil it down to it, where it was the adventure of exploring each and every new location was exciting to be at. Like everything, it was that classic Final Fantasy feel. It was that classic feeling from the original Final Fantasies that we were able to go to these different towns. You guys get what I'm saying. It brought that back, and that was so cool. And the whole game kind of felt like this road trip. I said during the last week's review, it kind of just felt like this road trip, like, or a high school vacation trip. I don't know, like, you know what I mean? Like where you're just with your friends. You got a little bit of love triangle going on. You got a little bit of feelings going on, and with your friends. You got the teacher or the freaking chaperone Barrett. All of that stuff was great, and it just felt so good to travel the planet with them. So when it comes to that stuff, I think, did we say our favorite town? What was your favorite town to like walk into, like to just like which one just blew you away as soon as you saw it? I mean, they all did, but like, which one was like, which
I think,
really
I
stood
think
out?
my favorite town would have to be Cosmo Canyon, actually. Like, I think you had some issues with maybe the region as a whole, but I think like as
No,
a town,
Cosmo Canyon was...
it was so, it was really great. It was actually kind of, I love how like there's so much relation that you could draw between the real world, like our world, and sort of this fantasy world in terms of it may have turned some people off, but I think purposefully so. The fact that it kind of is this is a little bit of a tourist sort of like trap, and like you hear people like NPCs being like, I'm finding myself here, and it's like very like you could picture like real people who like
Yeah.
you know show up to Cosmo Canyon and like have this like awakening, but then they go back to their 9 to 5 in Midgar later on, and like it's just like it kind of is very realistic that, of course, and there's like a peddler everywhere. Like it's not a good thing, but there's like now your water bottle will always be blessed by the gods or whatever that people say. Yeah.
While we're on the topic of Cosmo Canyon, I got two different things I want to talk about. First of all, before I do, Joel, yes, Calm, I think might have been my favorite. Now, Cosmo Canyon, first thing, I gotta say it, because we talked about it a little bit. I didn't want to cut you off because I was excited, but I didn't want to start saying, dude, the Gi lore was incredible. I freaking loved what they did with that. Gi Natak was so good, man. Like that whole journey through to find out how the black materia was created, and for it to like, subtext said to Lully's statement, but was subtext was like, yeah, I mean, like that you could argue that was just kind of like fleshing out the original. And my God, when they do that, is it beautiful? I love when they do that, man. And with the black materia and how it was formed with this new lore that we got with the Gi, it made me instantly want to make a video. I got a video in the works. I'm going to put that one out there eventually. But I picked up on so many things that was very exciting for me to kind of like, I need to get this out in a video form, a standalone video. So I'm not going to talk about it too much now. But the Gi Natak stuff was amazing. I love that we have this actual meaning of why the black materia even exists, because if there was anything like, okay, what are you going to take with the original and how are you going to make it better,
and to give them history with the Cetra too, like that creates like a whole new dynamic. Yep,
it sure does. And it's like, oh man, it makes so much sense of why I think in the original game Bugenhagen was like, yeah, they can't return to the live stream. But I think in the original game, it was more along the lines of their hatred and spite and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Won't allow them.
Unfinished business.
Yeah. And I love, and I'm going to give a little bit of my video out there, but I love that the Gi are literally the warning, or there's a word for this, a proper word, like a story term. That I'm trying to say.
Foreshadowing.
Maybe foreshadowing, or maybe it's the warning sign of like, this is not something to be desired. It is Sephiroth's main desire is to live forever. And even Aerith is like, forever is so lonely. Why would like that? There's no such thing as forever. Why would you want this of loneliness? And the Gi are literally living that, and all they want is it for it to end. And it's like, this was such a cool juxtaposition? No, that's not the word.
Kind of.
Antithesis. I don't know. I don't understand. I don't know what it is, but it's a word. But yeah, I really love that about the Gi and what their inclusion in this game. Loved it. And I don't. While we're on the topic of Cosmo Canyon, and I gotta ask what you guys thought of this. When Red's voice changed, where do you guys stand on it? Apparently, I have been informed that this has always been a thing in the Japanese translation. That
it has.
Okay, Red starts to talk like a teenager and stuff like that.
Yeah, he changes pronouns is the only, like, because they have like multiple ways to say like I. So you can say like ore, which is like more, like, I guess more masculine compared to like boku, which is more boyish. Okay. So I don't know if he did ore in Japanese originally, but he used a different one. He spoke like an older person, and then when he comes to Cosmo Canyon, they overhear him completely change his vocabulary and like the way he talks, and that was true in the original game.
It just didn't translate. It just
didn't
localize
because we don't do that, you know.
Right. That makes sense.
So like it makes sense given it is a Japanese game and like that's even how their audience sort of like it wouldn't be jarring for them or the creators to sort of see it that way.
Sephiroth does it too.
Yes.
That's how they show you that he's like off his rocker, because sometimes he talks like a god, sometimes he talks like a yakuza, sometimes like he completely changes the way he talks to people.
It's jarring though. I will say, like I even kind of expected it. The first time you heard Aerith and Red talking in Junon, and you overhear it in the room. I immediately knew what it was, and I think I probably wouldn't have known if I wasn't so into the community now and had seen people talk about that before. Like if it were just me from 2019 who jumped into Remake and then never engaged with everything and like played Rebirth, I would have been like very thrown for a loop.
Yeah.
And I still think it's a little jarring just because it's so different sounding. And when you hear Red's voice for the first time, it sounds so right. So yeah, it's strange.
It was a little too extreme on both ends. Well, maybe not on both ends, but like, and this is not like I'm not faulting the voice acting was great. Probably that was the direction it was given.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a little too young. I thought he went for like.
They could have added a little rasp to make it sound more like growly too, to keep that dog sound.
My boy went from like freaking awesome to like Sora. Like Sora joined the party, and I was like, oh whoa.
Nori Hicks in the chat says all I hear is Ryuji, which is from Persona 5, which that voice actor played that character.
Oh, is that right?
And like and it's like a teenage boy, and like it sounds.
I
will say like Max is definitely the right actor to do that though, because he is a chameleon vocally.
He can like change it on the fly.
He's incredible.
Yeah, he's an incredible voice actor. Yeah.
It definitely makes me want to protect him more in battle, because you'll hear if he gets low HP, it's so sad. You're like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, you little baby, you little pupper.
Oh man.
The going back to the Gi thing. Shoot, what was? Oh, there's the one thing that makes me that I hope is what they're leaning into, because when I first hit that scene, there had been some theories that popped up earlier in the year. One of them was like Michael Bustamante had the big video of like trying to figure out what the Zack world was, and like assumed that maybe it was like a stagnant world where death wasn't like where the cycle of life was cut off. And it seemed throughout a lot of the game that was actually what was happening, because the plants weren't coming back. There was no like seemingly sense of life moving and whatnot. So I thought that maybe that could be what they were building toward, especially like and that Sephiroth's endgame was. He was right basically about what Sephiroth's endgame was, of like to cut off that cycle and to live forever sort of thing. But the so it's interesting to have Gi be sort of the counterpoint to that, in terms of saying like that isn't what you want it to be, and like you can't they actually want death.
Yeah.
And it made me a bit hopeful, and I still hope it is, in terms of it seemed like it was still centering the game, because we talked a lot about fate, right? And obviously it's still a big conversation point, but I think what we all walked away from FF7, the original, with a little bit more was like life and death. And it seemed like a commentary more on that. And I do then hope that in the end, we do lose some people. Like, it seems like Aerith there may be a path to her living, if depending on how you read the rainbow thing. Zack obviously is around, but I kind of feel like we need to lose some people, but I don't know. They also could be shifting sort of the focal point of like, anyway, the Gi thing seems to be about like death can be a good thing. There is a point to like moving on, and so I hope that they still stays central to even the party's journey at some point.
Yeah, it really.
So don't want it to just be like changing that.
Yeah, that's why that was a big reason why I like the Gi. We went to Drakey's pointing out that the heavy tank, the Triceratops truck, wasn't in there. I was kind of disappointed in that, unless if I just haven't seen it yet. I haven't got 100%, so it could be a secret boss. I don't know.
I thought that it might be a secret boss in maybe the Gongaga area, but I haven't done all the battle.
Right. So it could be in there. Did you get 100% Drakey? I don't know, man. Like, it could be in there. But let's see. There was a question in here that I wanted to pitch to you guys, and I think I lost track of it. Oh,
well, while you search for that, the one other key thing I want to mention, because I mentioned earlier, I was critical of the Zack scenes and how they could be removed and and whatnot. And what's his name? Joel Vincent, I think was his name. Mentioned that he really liked them. He liked every time he came up, and like that was one thing I wanted to go back to, was like I did like every time we cut to the Zack stuff throughout the kind of journey of the game, because I was very curious as to what it was building toward. That there was a lot of interesting things. You start to him and Big sort of comparing notes on Cloud was interesting, because you get to understand a little bit more of how all this is working. But then in the geese scene where he touches Aerith's hands in that world, and then we see her, she's like drifting, she's like just kind of lazily has her hand in the live stream, and then like feels it. Like I thought that was so good. I was like, oh my god! Like, I was like, I jumped up in my chair a little bit, because it was such an interesting sort of visual.
Showed me that they're in the live stream. You know what I mean? These worlds are in the live stream, not in different universes. That's what it showed me. I got some quick notes that I want to throw out there. I got some quick ones here for you. I thought there was foreshadowing a little bit. I picked up on when Cloud is talking about the Nibelheim incident at the beginning, when he was like, I keep wondering if I would have came too sooner. I could have stopped Sephiroth and I could have saved the village. And this is mainly his, he's talking about his mom and Tifa. So setting that up for the final thing, where if he could break free from those whispers, he could have saved Aerith. So that kind of was a little bit of foreshadowing there. And then the sequence, we already talked about the sequence with the characters face the past. Best moment in the game for me. Let's see. One thing that I feel like I pointed out, but I don't think we really talked about too much. I'm sorry. I'm kind of wrapping it up a little bit. Sorry guys. I just want to. We've been talking for a while, so I'm kind of wrapping it up a little bit. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about was the fact that Rebirth. My biggest gripe with the game, one of my biggest gripes with the game was it, and it might not even be a gripe, because I really enjoy the MCU, right? So the MCU does this thing a lot where it doesn't really allow the viewer or the audience to really kind of feel that emotion too long. They want you to kind of move on to the next thing as much as possible. I feel like Rebirth kind of did this a little too much. And I got to thinking about it, and I was like, well, maybe the original was doing that too, right? Like the original kind of moved on pretty quickly as well. And I thought there was some genuinely funny moments. Like I laughed out loud a bunch. One of the times I laughed out loud was with Gus. I loved his character.
Oh my god.
Yeah, man, that was the best.
He was killing me.
With his music and everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, like with that kind of stuff, I was on board. I love the comedy. I love that. And this comparison is going to be brought up 1,000 times. And especially this is Final Fantasy TV, so I am going to compare it. Final Fantasy 16, one of the things that I really appreciated about that game was that it was not pulling punches. Like it really wanted to land that punch and let you fester in it for a little bit. And kind of jumping from 16 to Rebirth to moments where I felt like I wanted that. Because I feel like it helps me connect to these characters a lot better. It helps me feel for them. And Rebirth would kind of not. They would do the MCU style quite a bit, where it's like, hey, the next action set piece is right around the corner. Don't you worry. Barrett and Dine's scene in particular being one of those moments where I loved what they did with Dine and Barrett. Like I was on board with that. John Eric Bentley is a freaking phenomenal actor.
Yes.
And I was in there. I wanted to be fully committed to this. Like I got you, John. You have my attention. Like I am here to listen to your performance. And unfortunately, there were too many times where it just kind of got interrupted. Like it's like John over here pouring his heart out and like really trying to sell this scene, and it's like, hey, we got freaking Dio coming in, like a big macho man. We got funny moments here. Don't worry, guys.
The real big.
We got Dine turning into an alien hand. What's up?
Yeah, I thought the big sin of that scene, in terms of exactly what you're talking about, because it's when you asked the question of like not letting it sit. Yeah. There were two moments in particular where I felt that the most. One was the Barrett Dine thing. Yeah. And I think the biggest offender in that was the Palmer fight. Like,
Yes.
it just didn't need to happen. Like, it was actually, as a fight, like,
Yeah.
it was actually pretty
Cool
fun.
fight. Yeah, great fight.
But like, it was just
narratively, it was kind of dumb.
not the moment for that.
Yeah.
I actually don't mind, at the end of it all, if Dio shows up and gives us because we have to get the thing,
the
we have
Palmer
to get the
thing.
buggy and whatnot.
Yeah.
It was really the Palmer thing that like threw it off, like the motion. And then the other moment was, I will see the ending. Like, I know I've had some debates with some people on this, but like, I know it's kind of classic Final Fantasy tradition to have a long, big end boss battle, but that was like
10
hour.
freaking phases.
It
There was
was
like
an hour.
12 phases.
Gosh,
It was
man,
like-
I was a bad father because of that ending, man. I was like, my
Well,
daughter wanted to play with me.
and-
I was like, hey, listen, don't worry about it. I'll be done in just a second, okay, honey? And it's a whole hour. Because
And you know what makes me mad about that is if you die in the final part,
I did.
you don't get to replay from there, and you can't do the menu thing.
Mm.
And that really sucks for people who assumed Aerith wasn't
me.
going to be fighting with you, because I unequipped everything
Oh,
off
no,
of
you-
her. Everything. She had no materia. Nothing.
Thankfully,
I had
she
nothing on that
Blizzard. You
girl.
didn't have Blizzard. Did you?
I
how did you
was
win?
fighting with abilities and items. That's how I fought. That's how I fought that.
The only way I won that was I had Blizzard, just randomly one materia equipped to her was Blizzard, and that's the only way. And that's the only way I could win that battle was her casting Blizzara and me doing the freaking focus thrust 100 times to try to get them staggered. But yeah, I mean, like, that was the only way I could win. I had her cast an arcane ward right before I knew that he was going to get staggered. I died so many times. I don't know. Did you guys die so many times when he said he was
once.
staggered? And I whooped him. I was whooping his ass, and then I get him down to like he was dead, I thought, and then I failed, and I went, what am I doing wrong? What am I missing? What am I missing?
It's a timed
It's a
event. I
timed
think that
thing?
very last thing, yeah.
I could not.
You have to get him down before he basically ends everything.
He ended me like. I probably died.
My
maybe
advice
7
was to
times.
save your limit for that.
Yup.
Like if you've got him close, like right before he does it, keep your limit. Don't use it on
Did
him
not do
until
it. That's
he
what I
goes
did.
into that final thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That
So,
is
yeah.
exactly what I did. I saved my limit, and I used Blizzara when he was staggered. Blizzara, Braver, or not Braver, the limit break cross slash.
Ascension
Yeah,
is
cross.
oh.
I should have
I
done
used
that.
Ascension.
No, I
Thankfully,
should have done a little more synergies.
I thankfully only died once in that whole boss rush. It was just the very end. It was when he was doing his like final attack thing with the spinning
Yes.
things. It's like, yeah, I just didn't hit
And it's
the timer
impossible
in
to
time.
not get hit, so you
So
gotta
dynamic?
just you
What are
don't
they
have
doing?
time to
I was on
no strategy.
dynamic,
You just
yeah.
have to start beating the hell out of
Yeah,
him.
it got me so many times. And then when you die, you have to watch the cutscene because
Yep.
it's kind of like part of the battle and like of
Yeah.
Aerith walking through the thing. And I'm like, all right, come on, man, let's get to it.
Yeah, that sucked
It
too,
was-
not being able to
yeah.
skip the scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like I said, it was just how many phases and how long overall it was. It was like because it took my mind away from the moment. And
Yeah.
I was suddenly thinking about Zack thing and the different worlds and how all this is going to resolve. And then so like the Jenova fight in the original keeps you in that moment.
Mhm.
Where like you do the fight with her, the music is playing, and then it ends. And I don't think you could probably make it. You probably can't make it that short. And I do like the idea of porting over these like end game things, like that's Bizarro Sephiroth. So it's like bringing him a little bit earlier. Like that's interesting conceptually, but just like the amount of time it takes, it just kind of like sucks you out of the moment a little bit. And they're already doing so many things with that moment that
Yeah.
it's part of the reason why I felt that empty feeling at the end because I didn't know
Constructive-
how to feel.
Like
It's just
my thoughts on that is that I think they could have moved. They could have and gotten away with it. Moved the Bizarro fight before. So like when Cloud walks through the Whisper wall, I feel like he could have literally walked right into the edge of creation, fought Sephiroth, turned into Bizarro. They had the big scene, all the big fight and everything. And then after all that's done, have him walk out to the water altar, and then the stuff happens, and then fight Jenova and make that Jenova fight really easy. But like only like one wave, and then just that's it. Because like you get your final boss, and then you get the emotional impact without taking you away from it. I think that could have been cool. I think that could have been cool. Lolly Joe, this is a question for you. So, Was there a way to avoid being hit when Cloud was in the air? It didn't hit me.
Yeah, they're saying that they're basically giving me advice. They're saying that if I would have been airborne during that, it wouldn't have hit me.
Yeah, that's how I handled. Or is that during the Bizarro part?
It's when it's the final part when Sephiroth is like you're doing that timed final bit where you have to get him, you have to kill him before the
I was literally
up.
I was just dodging into open space.
I was trying
hitting, dodging.
Speaking,
so I didn't get
so
hit.
hard.
Aerith got hit though. Aerith is not as mobile.
I'm pretty sure you weren't able to adjust your materia after the like when you're fighting the Rebirth Bahamut, the Rebirth Bahamut Whisper. Because I died.
Oh my god!
So many times.
I was so afraid when that fight loaded in because it's like Kate Sith is like a mandatory.
You
in it,
can,
and I'm like,
you can for the first part of that.
You can? Okay.
Yeah, when you, after the Zack Cloud thing, if you die in the Bizarro Sephiroth thing, it'll ask you if you want to restart from the current battle, and that's when it'll make you watch that stupid in-battle cutscene or whatever.
Gotcha.
I don't even think it's not technically in battle. I think that's why they let you do it, is because they don't show anyone's HP or anything, because you're switching. So they have the menu button show during that scene.
Okay. Because I died.
I know because I had to use it.
I died a lot in that battle. That was like subtext was saying. I didn't have anything really ready for Kate Sith. I was getting wrecked. So let's see what else we got here, guys. You guys see anything in chat that you want to answer? Before we kind of give our closing thoughts, or you know what, we wanted to talk a little bit about, and we're gonna do this a little bit before we close this out. I want to be kind of done by 9:30, so we got about 20 minutes. Unless you guys got to go, I want to be respectful of your time as well.
9:30 sounds good.
Yeah, 9:30 is okay.
Cool. All right. So one thing that we didn't talk about, and it was something that we wanted to do, and I didn't bring it up. Let's go with part 3, theories. That is something that we wanted to kind of do. Where do we go from here, right? Like, we didn't get to talk about that, right? At least I don't think we did, right?
I mean, I kind of had a theory.
We talked about it a bit.
Did we talk about it a little bit? It's been a long time.
I talked about.
It's kind of baked in.
I know it's been a long. Yeah, I was talking about how I think that we're gonna end up, in an attempt to stop Jenova, we're gonna end up accidentally creating too many timelines, and it's gonna break the live stream a little bit.
That's right.
So the ending is gonna be they have to accept that they need to bring everything together, and that's how we lose Zack and Aerith permanently.
That's
in terms
right.
like they're gonna be in the live stream. They're not gonna be gone, but they're not gonna be alive.
I'm rewriting my memories. All right, I'm sorry. All right, so let's see. Man, I feel like everything I point out is like a negative thing, but it is something that I had to write down. I was really come on, man, come on, guys. Unless if Cloud was really so disconnected from everything that he was just like whatever. But Yuffie says it too. Yuffie in the final battle, after we just witnessed Aerith die, Yuffie's like, you gotta admit, this has been pretty fun. And like Cloud's like, oh yeah, it has been boring.
Yeah, that line is freaking weird.
Girl I really like just died, but I mean, other than that, this is fantastic.
Yeah, it's weird.
I don't think I caught that. I didn't think I heard that line.
Yeah.
The line I didn't hear it, but I was watching somebody play the ending the other day, and they pointed it out because I didn't hear it either. But it was like I'm pretty sure it was in the Jenova fight after Aerith's death. Is like they reused a Cloud line that's a common like battle line where he goes like nothing personal. It's like
it's kind of personal.
It's very personal.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like and then like Barrett during the dying fight, like he's still doing his like trash talk battle chatter. I'm like, come on, guys, can we get it as muted that?
We need to re-record some of
these.
I think it just patched maybe some of
that's something that's constructive criticism that I feel like can be patched. If we could just patch that out, that'd be great.
Yeah.
One of the things I went back to before this chat, because I was like, I was in my head on the multiple Aeriths thing. I was like, I wonder if, because there's a couple moments where there's seemingly a live stream sort of Aerith in Remake. Obviously the chapter 14 resolution scene, and then also even I for a long time have wondered, there's that scene in the Shinra building in Remake where she's describing her, the past and whatnot, and she's talking about the whispers, and she says like, "Follow them, the yellow flowers," and there's quotations around it, as if she's like quoting someone, and then it cuts, to a POV shot where it's like POV looking at an Aerith, and it's like, why would our Aerith have this POV memory of looking at an Aerith unless that's a different Aerith, right? So I was curious if like the yellow pin, the yellow flowers thing showed up in either one of those scenes, like if they maybe patched that into, but they didn't. There's no yellow flowers.
Yeah,
pin. That would have been funny.
That is a good point. We did a whole video on that stuff to follow the yellow flowers thing. Marius, you're right. There was some lines during the dying fight there where he's like, "Please forgive me," and stuff like that, which is cool. But there he was also like, "You gonna eat this shit?" or whatever. He's like, "Bam, I'm gonna get freaking, like, take that," So they were mixed in. So let's see the final. Do we have it? Favorite moment? What's your absolute favorite moment? Have we done that one? Favorite moment? I did mine.
No, not
I think
really.
Right.
What was yours?
There's a handful, but I'm not gonna lie. The minute I saw Myrna, I bawled. Just because I've been begging for them to, because he's such a family man, and we see that with Marlene. But in the original game, like we knew he had a wife, but he never talks about her. So I was kind of afraid they weren't gonna bring her up at all in Rebirth, and then in his trial, it's just all him and Myrna. I lost it. I was like, oh my god, it's her, the woman, the queen that we've never seen. There she is.
God, yeah,
it made me bawl.
That's when they let him cook. You know what I mean? That's when they let him cook, because it was
so good.
That made me cry. That scene, I was definitely tearing up a lot. In that was my favorite sequence. That was that whole the trials thing. What about you, Subtext?
I think my favorite moment, just because it was like so unexpected and so it was new actually, and so delightful, was in Junon, which we talked about it I think a little bit in the non-spoiler cast, but like what I just remember like running out of one of the stores and having my my troops, and they're like, "Did you find everything you hoped for, sir?" "Oh, sorry."
"Oh, so,
just
sir."
like the silliness of that infantry unit, and then it continued on like after so like there's someone who's disguising themselves as like being part of Shinra who's not part of Shinra, and here you are as some regular commander, and you're doing all this like crazy crap with like in front of your unit. I'm doing like limit breaks and jumping in the air, and like I'm so sus, it's insane. And none of them are really saying anything, except there's like a couple lines a couple times through where it's like I wonder and like clap. It's that whole thing with that whole infantry unit is so funny and so good.
That was pure OG level writing. That was perfect.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's my favorite.
Chapter 4 is the best chapter in the entire game, like, in my opinion. Like everything about Chapter 4 was everything I loved. So like it even had new things. So where like the Rufus and Yuffie thing, that was totally new. It was totally like something that was not in the original at all, and I loved it. Like you said, OG writing, like it was, and then going off the street and going in the back and seeing like the back streets or whatever, that was mind-blowing to me. Seeing the high wind bar. The high wind. I stopped. My wife was in the kitchen, and I'm just like and like she finally looks over. I'm like, "This is it. This is everything I wanted. This is it. I'm happy now." I was just so happy, man. Okay. Yeah, Chapter 4, the best in the entire game for me. Did you give your favorite? You said your Junon was your favorite. All right, so they messed up Fort Condor. Yeah, we talked about that in the review.
Does he mean the minigame or the location?
I imagine it's the minigame.
Yeah, because we don't get the location, but I assume we'll get it eventually.
Yeah. What about Loveless? The Loveless play was interesting. That is one that you need to go back and
you have to pay attention to it.
Yeah, that's going to be a pick apart, like every little tiny thing, because that
Did you pick up they called it G edition at Gold Saucer? Because I don't think it's because it's the Gold Saucer edition. I think it's someone else's.
A little Genesis hint. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, for sure. And even, wasn't it Genesis that wrote that ending in a way? Like, wasn't he the one that...
I don't remember.
I can't remember.
I haven't played Crisis Core in so long.
There was an ending that was added at the very end. I don't know if it's the same ending as
yeah.
What was it? Like the play is pretty different from the poem.
Genesis thing.
Version.
See, that's the one that I'm going to have to go back, and you really need to pick that one apart, like frame by frame, because in like word for word, whatever they're saying.
Yeah.
Because that is probably the everything you need to know about the story type thing.
That has what maybe I was thinking about. I talked about this also on my OG playthrough. But in terms of like that end game, part 3 that Loli was talking about, in terms of like having to say goodbye eventually to Aerith and Zack, or that they have to die. At the end of that play, it's actually the ending from the original game. Like Sid in the original game, before you go into the crater, he has a optional dialogue that you have with him about Loveless.
Yeah.
And he says, like, I forgot I fell asleep during all of it. All I remember is the end. And I was actually in here, like, he does fall asleep, so they stay faithful to that.
Yeah.
But the ending is about, like, them having to say goodbye. And so I wonder if that's how that'll happen in part 3. Or, like, maybe we do get Aerith back in some way, or there's some interaction between us and Zack and Aerith and however. But, like, it has to inevitably, they have to return to the live stream, and because there's that one word merge live stream or whatever thing. That would be interesting. And there's so many shades of Final Fantasy X within this game, like the Aerith having her Yuna moment in the temple.
Yuffie mentioning YRP.
Yes, I picked up on that too.
It was like the Tensu thing, but also that the ending of Final Fantasy X. Not to spoil it, but like that. Someone having to move on and like having a conversation. Like I think that they might do something like that in part 3 of this.
That's true. I would say for as far as the Loveless thing is, they take a ton of liberties, is what Drake is saying. Taking a ton of liberties about Dragon Kings and poor Valvados, man. The guy that's in our Discord, sorry, man. Valvados is no longer, it's Varvados. But anyways, he says there's no Dragon King and all that other stuff in Loveless. I think we need to focus on the Jessie dance. I think that's what I think needs to be broken down like to a T, because I feel like there's so much there that needs to be talked about. I loved what they did with the Cloud and the party interaction with the play. Like I thought that was really cool. I did somewhat miss that they didn't go out there and make fools of themselves like from the original game. Like it wasn't super funny. But the rest of the game had that funny in it. But
it's funny to watch Cloud be a theater kid. I won't lie.
I will say the orchestration of it was really weird in terms of like the logistics of it. I didn't fully understand because they sit down and they put on the headset.
Yeah.
And they have like the Jesse scene. Then he takes it off.
Yeah.
But then he puts the goggles back on. And so but Aerith left that entire time. Because obviously she was going to end up like doing the song or whatever. Yeah. But
so she's singing on stage, or is she not?
But then at the very end, it shows everyone in the audience. But then Cloud, Barrett, Red, and Aerith are on stage. But then it cuts to them like again with just the headsets on. So I don't know what was happening.
I think that's the plot hole they didn't think about when they wrote it. To be honest,
what was happening in VR?
There was a lot of this. I was like, wait, are they on the stage? They're taking a bow, but are they? But they're not. They're in the seat. But I did really like Loveless too. I actually walked into that theater when you're on your date on the chapter 8, and I walked into the theater and I was like. I was just kind of blown away by the theater. I was like, man, they've done so good on all of these locations. All these environments look so good. I think it was Drakey C asked us who we took on the date. This one's going to be controversial. So I took on chapter 8. I was working with Aerith. All right, listen, I like Aerith. You know what I mean? I was like, Aerith, I've grown attached to her, and I feel like our time's going to be kind of limited if this is going to go the way I think it's going to go. So let me spend some time with Aerith, and the game kind of made me feel like that wasn't the right choice. Like in a weird way, like I kind of felt like Aerith kind of like she conflicted. We're all conflicted. So I was like, I'm gonna switch over to Tifa. So I took Tifa on the next date. So I had chapter 8 was Aerith, chapter 12, or chapter 12. I don't know. Chapter 12 was Tifa.
It's chapter 12.
Yeah, so I got a little bit of both. All right. So there you go. A little bit of both.
I got
the kiss scene from Tifa.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got Aerith. I was doing the run where it was like, just because I didn't know her fate, so I wanted to feel it. I wanted the most emotional weight going into the finale by having the most time with Aerith.
Dude, hold on, I'm sorry. Yeah. You were stuck. You were stuck in slow motion, man. I don't know how this is happening.
My internet glitched a little bit.
You were stuck in slow motion as you're talking. This is fantastic. If you want to maybe turn off your camera and turn it back on, that might work. That might work.
My internet also
That's so much. You're
bit.
You're better. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You were talking and you were in slow motion.
Funny.
It was fantastic.
Yeah. I'm curious also, what are your which of the non-romantic dates was your favorite? Actually, so I went back, I watched all of them.
I gotta go back and watch the non-romantic ones.
You know what I thought was, well,
I want to watch Guys Night. That's the only one I care about was Guys Night.
You know what I was surprised by? I really liked the Yuffie one. I think the Yuffie date is funny, and there's like a lot of like interesting. The way it ends is really funny. It's like very cute. She talks about Zack a little bit. There was like a reference. She doesn't say his name exactly. It's kind of similar to the original game, where it's like not a romantic thing at all, but like she kind of hints a little bit at maybe like having a little bit of a crush or whatever. I don't know. It's like a very funny, kind of goofy date. Actually,
That's cool. I was talking to a friend and he's like, "Hey man," he was like, "Hey, I didn't talk to John Bentley, and that came out like John Bentley. Hey man, like I was talking to a friend and he's like, who did you get on the date?" And I was like, "Oh man, you got Tifa on the second time around. I got the intimate one." I said, "Who'd you get?" And he's like, "Man, I got Red 13 for some reason." He's like, I don't understand, man. He's like, I did all these quests, I did everything I needed to do. Apparently, I did a lot for Red. Like, apparently, like me and Red were really close. I just thought it was funny. He was like, man, I didn't get any of that. I got Red for some reason. I was like, Red does suspiciously, weirdly enough, Red has the most like option. Like when you go into the menus at the end of all the different things you could build up for Red, he has the most. It seemed like all the different things that he could do, and then all of the earlier side quests seemed to be more Red focused. It seemed. So man, if you weren't finding the one that you wanted to take out, you were taking Red out. I thought that was funny. He said he got Red. No, I haven't. I haven't seen any of the other ones, so like I didn't get to see the Barrett one. So Faith alone said that Barrett was hilarious, so I got to see that one too. All right, let's see. All right, you guys. Well, let's go ahead and close this one out, right? So let's give our closing thoughts on the spoiler cast. Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth. Now you can finally tell me everything that you feel about Rebirth unfiltered, right? So this is your chance to give me and everybody watching our official review. Wait, Drakey says, "Wait, please." We got a question for me or something? I have a question for. Oh, there it is. I got a question for the panel. All right, I'll take one more. Barrett is such a you know what, Nori Hicks pointing out Barrett is such a dad. Speaking of side quests being such great, like they were great writing. The side quests were great, and this is where again I will compare it to Final Fantasy 16, where I was like, man, these side quests have great writing. I'm just not having fun. But like the Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth flips that and makes it super fun to do these side quests, and then you have the banter while you're on the side quest with like Barrett when you're escorting the dog Salmon, and Barrett he's like talking about his daughter, and then like he starts. You guys know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about when he's talking about his daughter? Gosh, oh man, it's slipping my mind. What did he do? Was he like thinking about his daughter growing up? Or something like
that.
It was the Marlene,
with the dog.
When he was running after the dog.
Yeah, Marlene.
Yes.
Growing
oh my
up.
god.
I'm like, oh man, this is so good.
There was like so much overload in that whole
There was
mission
so
'cause
much
it was
great
like,
about it.
no, in a good way. In a good way.
Yeah,
It was like
yeah.
I was so happy about the song. I was so happy about the dog. I
Yeah,
was so happy about
that was
They
Barrett.
made an
Like,
escort mission great.
Wait,
I don't know
what?
how they
Yeah.
did it.
exactly. Oh man. All right. So Drakey C says, "Do you think it is coincidence that the visions we saw in Temple of the Ancients of humans attacking the Cetra, they looked similar to the warriors in Loveless? That is true. They did look similar to the warriors in Loveless."
I don't think there's a coincidence at all. I think it's
I hadn't really
important.
thought of it, but
Focus.
someone talked about how, because Gast mistook Jenova for a Cetra, and so the way that the Jenova is depicted is like a goddess in that scene, right? If I'm remembering correctly. And we have the gift of the goddess, which, if we want to twist it, might be like geostigma or, whatever. So is it possible that maybe Loveless is also like a cult story or something?
Whoa.
I just went
You
off the
actually-
rails there, but
Oh my god, Lully, you actually just completely made
Damn.
me.
oh no.
I think you're totally right about because I was curious why the Cetra, because it says that the Cetra defeated Jenova, but then they were very much overcome by their grief, right? That's what led to their sort of downfall and their demise. And obviously the geostigma is centered
and
on
Broden
your sort
has
of like.
geostigma.
I thought he just has degradation, but
Yeah, some sort of.
I thought it
sickness.
was a because he has a mysterious illness is what they call
Yeah.
it, and I think
Well, when
it's
you do
supposed
the
to be
side
early
quests-
geostigma or something.
Well, when you do the side quest with him, all the way through, I don't know if you did that
Yeah.
quest line with him.
I
like,
don't think I have yet.
He reveals that he was a soldier, and so he's
Oh,
like
yeah,
also
that's
just
true. He
having his
did say that.
degradation. So it's a degradation.
Yeah, it could be that too.
But the Cetra thing, I didn't realize that that might be what that is what
Mm-hmm.
happened to the Cetra was geostigma. Because
Yeah.
they were taken down by their grief and their sadness and all that, and that is exactly what geostigma,
What
is
geostigma does.
in having children. So
As Saya says that.
We cracked it.
Yeah, Saya says in Crisis Core, Loveless is a cult. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So hopefully that answers your question. We had one above that one from Joshipu, says that would love to hear how the panel feels going into part 3 compared to going into Rebirth. So as you're giving your closing thoughts in your final review, with spoilers included, maybe throw that in there. How are you feeling going into part 3 compared to Rebirth? So I'll start with Lully.
So my overall thoughts, I love the characters so much. That's what makes Rebirth. That's what made Remake for me too. Like no matter how you feel about where the narrative direction is going, like the world and the characters are so right that like it's so much fun to interact with them, to be with them, to learn about them, and like have these memories. Like the first time I saw Aerith in Remake, for example, I cried because it felt like she had been revived from the dead, right? Because we only got one disc with her, and then she's dead the rest of the compilation. And I mean, unless you really like her in Crisis Core, but I kind of don't. But but like, so it felt like, oh my God, there she is, and I haven't seen. Like, it's like if you lost someone you loved in real life, and suddenly you're seeing videos of them that you've never seen before. It's like, oh my God, it's you. Like, I still have you. So it's like the characters feel so right. Watching them interact with each other is like, it's so amazing. It's so meaningful. It feels like reuniting with old friends and exploring the world. It's like every time you walk in, you're like, yes, this is exactly what I had hoped it would be, and even more sometimes. So I feel like Rebirth took all the things I liked about Remake and just amped it up. Like we went from like 100 to 300. Like it was so good. Even characters, like, because everyone knows I'm not a huge fan of Crisis Core, but even all the stuff with Cisne, I like loved the hell out of that, and it was just, it's so wonderful. And like I said, I told myself after I found out they were even doing the Remake trilogy, I was like, whatever happens, happens, and we're here for the ride. Ain't no getting off of this train we're on. We're here for the ride. We might not necessarily like the way they're going, and who knows if we'll like the end. But you know what? At least the people on the ride with me are great people, and we're going to have a good time no matter what. So going into the third part, I don't know. I kind of feel the same way I was feeling No, you know what? I'm actually a little more excited only because I am so curious to see what is going to happen with this timeline crap. I'm just curious at this point. Like, where are you going? Where is the destination? I'd like to know.
Yeah. It may bring joy. It may bring fear. But let us embrace
Yeah.
whatever it brings. What about you, Subtext?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I love Rebirth. Like, as a full experience and getting to, I mean, we talked a little bit about it on the non-spoiler cast, but like, getting to see the world that was always in our imagination, like, fully realized and being able to really explore that, really get to know all these characters. You know, it feels like inevitably there will be things in this entire trilogy that disappoint. Things that are maybe big, like endings of games for some people. Things that are small, like in the first game, I wanted to go into the Avalanche basement. I couldn't, in the Seventh Heaven, couldn't do that. In this one, the Shinra Manor was nerfed and turned into a Kate Sith minigame. But like, I want to go upstairs, not downstairs.
I wanted my spiral staircase, damn it.
But then you have like the Vincent fight, and it's hype as hell, and it's
Yes.
amazing, and it's like,
I loved that.
We didn't talk about it. Yeah, I loved it too.
Yeah. And it's incredible. So I think like there will be. I think for a lot of people, I think I've come to accept that I will probably love 90 to 95% of the entire trilogy and the individual games in between. And as a whole, it might. Did I start like freezing again or something?
No, I just read Joshy Poo's comment. I'm like, God damn, that's the video I'm writing. Would you still like? All right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And so yeah, I think like 90 to 95% of each individual game in the trilogy will be amazing, and there'll probably be like some parts of it that don't hit. I'm just hopeful that the totality of it will hit, because, you know, I think walking into Rebirth, a lot of things that I talked about in some of my videos actually kind of did happen. Sometimes they were specific events, like when Sephiroth said, you know that I killed her, so who is she? I predicted that he would say that right after the flashback, and he did. I talked about things like the unreliable world, and that feels more real than ever before in terms of like all these different realities and how all that works. And I shared a clip on Twitter the other day of like how I talked about how like what they're gonna make us do. They're gonna like switch things up in a way that it's gonna make us feel like the original story is gone. And like I remember coming to the end of Rebirth and feeling like, oh wait, so maybe some of these things that were central to the story are gone. Like we talked about it earlier, right? Of like life and death versus like fate, the balance of those themes and whatnot. So like there are. I'm still hopeful that like I just think they're throwing us off the scent, and I don't know where it's leading. It may be very different, it may not. But I think it'll be fascinating, kind of like Lily talked about. I think this whole journey has just been so much fun no matter what, you know, because we've had the chance to have such great conversations. We have so many amazing moments within the game itself. Like even the things that disappoint me I'm not angry about like any of them. And I do think that there are like I think it's so many perspectives are valid. I've read threads where, because now I really quite like the ending, like just in terms of like what it might set up, you know. Even if in the moment it didn't fully hit completely for me because I was so centered on the Aerith moment and like how they were resolving that then. But I think long game it could be amazing. I don't know. But I've seen threads of people tearing it down, and I'm like, I agree with almost every point this person brought up. Like it's not like what they're saying is not out of pocket at all. Like I think that's a perfectly valid take on what we just experienced, because it is still so open and so undefined, and like they've been so focused on like setting up the next thing that it's hard to evaluate the thing that you have in front of you. But I think still it was an incredible game. It was like worth all of that time. I can't wait to like do some of the new game plus stuff and go back and finish all the regions and like spend more time with these characters who I had to say goodbye to in the credits, but now I get to spend more time with them. So I'm like, I think it was an incredible ride, and I think we're going to keep debating it for years as they are wont to do with us when it comes to remakes. So.
Well, I'm glad that for me personally, going out of Rebirth and going into Part 3, I don't feel like I did after Remake going into Rebirth. So what I mean by that was when Remake rolled credits, it took me a long time to get back to where I needed to be excited about Rebirth. And I am so happy that Rebirth delivered. Like I can't overstate it enough, like how the feeling that I feel now and the feeling I felt going into Rebirth is so entirely different than how I felt in 2020 with Remake. And I think, if anything, maybe that gives me, I don't know, more optimism going into Part 3, where I'm like, okay, I feel like I can trust them in the sense of, like, they've made me love these characters all over again, if not even more than I did in the original. And that is something truly remarkable. Like, that is an achievement in itself. And it's the reason why I keep saying so many times whenever I get like the argument, and I'm sure it's going to pop up in this in the comments of this video as well. It's always going to be like, oh, purists, like, oh, purists, like, it's a word that keeps getting thrown around as if it's like a negative connotation. Like, I don't know, but purists is a word that keeps getting thrown around, and it's just like, man, the 90% of this game is perfect, and it is not purist material. I mean, we have things like Tifa getting thrown into the live stream and like having her whole moment in the live stream we didn't talk about, which was huge and incredible. Yeah, and I loved how that went down. Like, that was some things that I was very shocked. It was subverting my expectations, and it was in a good way, and it was very eye-opening to it wasn't eye-opening to me, but maybe it's eye-opening to others. If you really think about it, the game is at its best when the whispers are not on screen, like when they're not interfering with like trying to change how you interpret the original, not trying to change things at all. It's just, hey, we're writing the story a little different. And I think going into Rebirth, one of the big inspirations, and now I can see it as clear as day, was when Hamaguchi said that the live action Beauty and the Beast was kind of an inspiration on how to take classic material and rewrite it in a fresh way to keep people excited about it, but also tell the story that they've told. And that's how the game felt. It was definitely adding new things, like the gi. I love the gi, the Tifa thing falling into the thing, the Junon parade, all of that. Yuffie, giving her more of an actual like introduction, like this was the reason why Yuffie's doing what she's doing, and like she is a ninja, she is an assassin, like she's going to assassinate the president, and like all that stuff was really, really cool and interesting to me. So overall, I loved all of those things. And then it was just kind of like, okay, when you start bringing in, and this is what Night Sky Prince said, and I say it again from last week's episode into this week's episode, because God, I keep coming back to it. And Night Sky Prince nailed it.
He did.
Yeah, he said something along the lines of that Rebirth excels when it's a remake of the original game, and I don't know if he said fails or it starts to fall apart.
It's at its worst.
It's at its worst when it's trying to be a sequel to Remake. And I do agree with that. And it's only a sequel, really, truly only a sequel to Remake at the final, like at the very end. And like, the scattered throughout with the Zack stuff to kind of try to give you answers of what that is. And it's also the weakest elements for me. Like the Zack stuff was weak for me. I don't really care too much about multiple timelines in the first place. It's always a really hard sell for me whenever you introduce the multiverse. MCU has introduced the multiverse and it fell apart. Like nobody watches the MCU anymore. It's not as exciting as it used to be because of all the convoluted multiverse crap. And I can't think of a story where that actually, or any medium where that actually feels right. Like I can't see that being a good conclusion.
The only time it's ever really truly worked for me was Everything Everywhere All at Once.
That was a good. Okay, so
on that, yeah.
But that was the whole premise of the film.
No, yeah.
Whereas like, gee, that's not.
Well, Final Fantasy has to do that. Like 7 has to kind of do that now. They have to like find a way to make this work. And I have kind of gotten, like we talked about in the show, I've gotten myself in a mental mind state of like, okay, these are not actual universes. They're not multiple worlds. It's just a word, their keyword they're throwing around. And that's kind of got me going in it. With Sephiroth saying worlds will merge and everything will become one again. I'm like, that's what I'm zeroing in on. I'm like, that's actually where I want it to go. I don't like the universe, like bring it all together again. Let's bring it back together. And I think that's what part 3 is going to be about anyway. To bring it all together, the reunion will happen and all that other good stuff. So anyways, as far as like my thoughts on Rebirth, I think it was a freaking 10 out of 10 experience. Like, I have not been that excited to play a game once a game started. So like I'm the warrior of hype, so I'm always really hype about a game before it comes out, and then I play it and I'm like, did it meet my expectations? Did it meet my hype? Or was it like, it was good? Or was it a disappointment? But there's never been a game with Rebirth I was excited, I was hyped, but I was always like, I know what Rebirth or Remake did to me. I started Rebirth and all of those concerns went out the window. And like for the entire time I played the game, I was like, I even laid in bed one night. I said this last week where I was just like, this could be better than the original. Like they're doing something that's better than the original game, and that was blowing my mind. So anyways, the ending just did not work for me. Fell apart with the ending, and I'll keep saying that I don't like it. I don't vibe with it on the way that it was presented. I think it fell apart. I think it was a little sloppy in the presentation of it, even if they are trying to tell that story. Going into... I'm
very curious. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just saying, going into part 3, I'm excited about like what they're capable of doing with all the new locations that we're going to explore. Because you got to think, we didn't explore Rocket Town. We got the Icicle region. We've got Wutai, Mediel, underwater, the skies. Yeah, like we've got so space is going to be. You're not going to explore it maybe, but you're going there maybe. So and you got the weapons. Everything is going to be so epic in scale for part 3 that I'm so freaking excited. Part of me thinks, oh, this game is going to be 3 years out because I want it to fall on the 2027, that big anniversary. Oh, it's got to be long ways out because they got to do so many epic things. Like, I want this game to be Final Fantasy 16 icon battles like throughout. But it also raises the question, do we even fight the weapons? Now the weapons, I'm sure, are aware of the actual threat of what's happening. Why would they, we don't have to fight them. That's a question for another time. Yeah, a super chat there. I'm going to read it because I really appreciate the super chats. This is from Bam. I don't think it's multiple timelines. Always felt it was more like we got what's happening in the real world and then in the live stream world. Love you, man. That's what I've been saying. Yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at with it, guys. And what were you going to say, subtext, earlier?
I would just, I thought you had wrapped up because I was going to jump in and just be like, I do wonder how they'll all string together, though. Like, how it'll feel if you play 1 through 3 connected, important. Because, like, it's that time in between that's, like, just such a challenge of what they're making, I think.
So important because...
I think it's meant to be one thing.
Yeah.
And it feels weird because we don't have that thing.
Yeah, it's like, well... I wondered that too, and I think that might be what holds it back from being perfect in a weird kind of way, where it's like, oh man, I want to replay Final Fantasy 7 Remake. Oh, I gotta do 30 hours of Remake, 30 hours or 50, 80 hours of Rebirth. I gotta go into, like that's an investment. But it's working in a way where it kind of feels like a series, like a TV series rather than a movie, in video game terminology. That is a good point, man. I'm very curious of how it all works out, especially if part 3 does pay off with grief, as in what Joshy Poo said earlier in the show. So, yeah. So, man, I want to keep talking, but I am going to close it out now. I want to say a big, very special thank you to Lully and Subtext. Thank you so much for joining me for this show. I honestly didn't have my thoughts together, and I'm glad that we were just talking, just trying to get this stuff. So if it came out that way for you watching, I'm sorry. Just needed the vent. We needed to get it out there. But yeah, thank you guys so much for sticking around, everybody watching and everyone who subscribed. I see you guys down there as well. Thank you so much for that. Super chats and all. Man, you guys are awesome. It's been great to be back to making content and talking about this stuff. Next week, I'm going to be coming back with a probably the panel review, like the PAX East panel for Final Fantasy 16. I did have a interview lined up. It's going to be pushed back to April, so be excited about that. It is an interview with someone who had their hands on with Rebirth. Very excited about that. So look forward to that in April. And then at the end of the month, March 30th, Feud. The Family Feud style game show. It's Rebirth themed, and yeah, we got Blitz and his party versus Unileska and her party, and they are going to be revealed on Twitter, so stay tuned as I just kind of announce their party members and we build up to it. Last thing, pay attention to the community tab and on Twitter. The survey will go up sometime this week. Fill out the survey so you're not disappointed with the top 5 answers. That's it. Thank you so much for watching this. Take care now. Bye-bye then. And I'm going to keep it live for just a moment. Because if it breaks my computer, it breaks it. You know what I mean? It breaks it because we're at the end of the video now, baby. There's nothing you can do to stop me.
I thought you were going to say Choco bye-bye again.
Choco bye-bye. Choco hello.
Oh my gosh.
Choco bye-bye.
I wonder if Little
Where was that
Caesars
again?
is still
I forgot
around.
where that was mentioned.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, I need to get some food too.